Jersey, or are you guys done in Jersey?
A little bit like that.
Your wife has to still be there.
She's been up here. She left.
Doesn't she teach down there?
Yeah, but she gave that up. I've got 6:30. Steve, could you get the door? All right. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Jack Courier. I serve you as the chair of the Nashua Zoning Board. Before we get going in our cases tonight, I'd like to walk through a little bit of our rules and regulations. Again, this is the Nashua Zoning Board. If you're here for the Board of Aldermen, that's one floor below us. If you don't have a copy of the agenda, it's on the table in the back. Feel free to get a copy. If you don't have one, you can see where your case is in the order. We have 5 cases tonight. And if anybody has a cell phone, I ask if you could please put it on silent, vibrate mode, or turn it off. First tonight, this meeting is recorded 3 ways. It's recorded video, and I'd like to thank in advance Tim, the man behind the door, who's capturing all the action. It'll be replayed later this week on Nashua Public TV. It's also recorded audio, and in a few days you'll be able to stream it at the nashuanh.gov website. And we also do complete a written transcription of the minutes. Therefore, all testimony tonight needs to be into a microphone, and I ask that we only have one person speaking at a time, and I'll be directing who's speaking. So let's get through the order of how we go through the cases. At each case, the applicant will speak first, and the applicant will have up to 15 minutes to make their points of law. And that's what we're looking for tonight, are points of law, and I'll go through those in a minute. So the applicant will have up to 15 minutes. We have a timer that'll count down from 15 minutes. It'll be green for the first 14, then yellow from minute 14 to 15, and then turn red. If you're still testifying, I'll be asking you to wrap it up right away. The board is likely to ask questions of the applicant or anyone else who's speaking. After the applicant has spoken, anybody else who wants to speak in favor of the application will have up to 5 minutes at the microphone to present their case. After all positive testimony is received, anyone with questions, concerns, or opposition to a case, to that case at hand, will have up to 5 minutes to make their points. And after all opposition, if there is opposition, sometimes there isn't, if there is opposition, then the applicant will have 5 minutes back at the microphone to address the opposition. And then if there is opposition again, the applicant will be back for 5 minutes. And then the one and only one person who has spoken in opposition will have the final 5 minutes. And what I've just described is the public hearing component of each case. So that each case will start with a public hearing where we hear from you, the public. Then after we've heard the testimony from the applicant and others in favor and others opposed, then the public hearing will end and we'll start the public meeting, and that's where the board will meet here in front of you and will likely decide a case. And while I'm speaking of the board, to my right is Ms. Mary Ellen McKay, who serves as our clerk. Going around the table is Mr. J.P. Boucher, who's our vice chair. We have new alternate member Jay Welch. Also full members Rob Shaw and Steve Lionel. And to my left is Mr. Carter Falk, and he serves as on staff as a deputy planning manager. And a little bit more about us. We are all residents, citizens of Nashua, who have been seeking at some point to get involved in municipal government. And for us to be here, we have expressed an interest, and we have been appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the Board of Aldermen, and our terms are 3 years. We are lay people. We're not attorneys. We do go through state-provided training on the points of law of zoning. So after when we begin the public meeting component, we're likely to decide. For any request tonight, there'll need to be 3 or more affirmative votes, and there'll be 5 folks voting. It'll probably be the 5 full-time members, but if a full-time member recuses, then Mr. Welch will be up at bat to cast his vote on the case before us. And a little bit now, moving on to the points of law, we're hearing 3 different types of cases tonight. We're hearing variances, special exceptions, and an equitable waiver. Variances, I'll briefly speak about the points of law. And per New Hampshire law, there's 5 requirements which a zoning board of adjustment is mandated to believe they've find merit in the case to grant a variance. Number 1 is that the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. Number 2 is that the spirit of the ordinance is observed. Number 3 of 5 is that substantial justice is done. Number 4 is that the values of surrounding properties are not diminished. And that number 5, literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. So that's the requirements for a board to find approval for a variance. We're also hearing special exceptions tonight, and special exceptions are, the bar is a little bit lower. Special exceptions are uses that are listed in this big, thick book of zoning, and I'll just speak for a moment. The reason we're here tonight is because every request is seeking some sort of deviation from this book of zoning, which has been established through the legislative branch or the mayor and the board of aldermen. And essentially, we are a safety valve or a way to prevent a lot of disputes in court, because historically there's a lot of disputes about zoning. So the New Hampshire State Court has set up zoning boards of adjustment to be the kind of first line of discussion for zoning adjustment. So I was speaking about special exceptions. The 5 criteria is 1, that they must be listed in this book of zoning as being a special exception, and what's before us tonight are all listed there. Number 2 is that the requested use activity will not create undue traffic congestion or unduly impair pedestrian safety. Number 3 of 5 is that the requested use or activity will not overload any public water, drainage, sewer system, or other municipal system. Number 4 is that special regulations, if there are special regulations for the use or activity, need to be fulfilled. And for example, if there's an in-law request or an accessory use request, there's some special regulations. We'll get into that as we get to each case. And number 5 is that the character of the neighborhood and that the requested use or activity will not impair the integrity or be out of character with the district or immediate neighborhood. So that's the 5 criteria for a special exception. Our first case tonight is an equitable waiver, and there's, I think I'll take a moment. We don't get these often, but I'll briefly read through what's required for an equitable waiver. Is that the violation was not noticed or discovered by any owner, former owners, owner's agents, representatives, until the structure in violation has been substantially completed. Number 2 was that the violation was not an outcome of ignorance of the law or ordinance, that it was caused by either a good faith error in measurement or by an error in ordinance interpretation. Number 3 of 4 for an equitable waiver is that the physical or dimensional violation does not constitute a public or private nuisance. And number 4 is that due to the degree of past construction or investment made in ignorance of the facts, the cost of correcting so far outweighs any public benefit to be gained that it would be inequitable to require the violation to be corrected. So that's the criteria for an equitable waiver. A few other points is that whatever decision we make tonight is there's a 30-day window of appeal. So if a party of standing feels aggrieved, your next step would be to request a rehearing request of which you have 30 days to do so. And if you're interested in doing that, you could give Mr. Falk a call. If this board receives a rehearing request and we find merit in that rehearing request and decide to rehear the case, then whatever decision we made, whether it was an approval or a denial, is stayed. So keep that in mind, because even if we're likely to make decisions on the cases tonight, but that decision is essentially, you could say, a bit on hold for 30 days until that window of appeal times out. If a party submits a rehearing request and we don't hear it and still feels aggrieved, the next step would be to take the matter to Hillsborough County Superior Court. Before we get going, I see we have an alderwoman in the audience, and in the past, when there's been an aldermanic meeting downstairs, we've had aldermen who need to be downstairs for the meeting testify first and then go on their way. I didn't know, I'm looking at you in the back, Ms. Meleza. If you want to come to the mic and just state your name and address for the record, you might want to pull that down.
Good evening. I'm Alderwoman Marianne Melizzi Golia. I'm the Alderwoman from Ward 8. I live at 2 Amble Road. And thank you for that opportunity, but I am fine this evening, just allowing the normal course of business to go.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Okay. Are there any questions from anyone in the audience before we get going? Mr. Shaw?
Just one clarification, since we do have the 6 of us that are here, even though Mr. Welch is an alternate member, and just for the public's benefit, Mr. Welch will typically participate in all the discussion, asking questions. He just won't vote on the case. So if there's maybe a little bit of confusion as to why that's going on, that's our normal practice. Any alternates that are with us do participate pretty much fully other than the actual vote. So I just wanted to help.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. Our membership's been low, and we're great. We have a new member, and so thank you for reminding me. Mr. Welch will be fully participating tonight, except for the vote, unless if one of us recuses ourselves. Thank you for that clarification. I think we'll get going, and we'll open the public hearing on case number 1. Case number 1, the owner is Brook Village North Associates. The address is 201 Brook Village Road, and this is the request for an equitable waiver of a dimensional requirement to maintain an in-ground swimming pool. You can just pull the microphone off the end if you want to hold it. All right. Again, to maintain an in-ground swimming pool, pool deck, pool house, and related fencing, which is located over the lot line, and this is in the RC zoning district. And this is Ward 8, right? Not Ward 9?
Should be.
Yes, Ward 8. Hi, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Brad Westgate. I'm a lawyer with Weiner & Bennett, 111 Concord Street in Nashua. I represent the applicants, Brook Village North Associates Limited Partnership and Nashua Investors Limited Partnership. Before I start, Mr. Chairman, I just thought I'd pass out 11 by 17 size copies of the plan I posted on the pin board.
Sure.
You may all have them appended to your application copies anyway, but just so you don't, in case you don't.
If there's anyone in the audience with an interest in this case and they can't see what's hanging on the board, feel free to come up and take a look at it or get yourself situated where you can see the map of Brook Village North. Thank you.
First of all, Mr. Chairman, we're actually apologetically have to be here, but I'll explain why as we get through the reasoning why the location of this pool and pool house wound up where it was. What I posted on the board is an as-built plan, or the surveyors call an ALTA plan, which was recently done this past September of the property at 201 Brook Village Road. It's also known as Sheet A, Lot 646. If you take a look in the sort of lower left corner of it where I've highlighted, you'll see I've highlighted the location of a pool and pool house, and the box around it is fencing. You can also see that a small portion of the pool, which are actually its steps, has gone over the property line onto Lot 684. That's about 4 feet's worth if you scale it off on this as-built plan. Also, about 2 feet's worth of the pool building has gone onto Lot 684. This pool was approved as part of a site plan approval for 201 Brook Village Road, that is Lot 646, the main lot you're looking at, back in 2009. It was approved to be located essentially in this location, but obviously further setback. I think the setback requirement is either 6 or 7 feet on the side yard setback in this zone. Not right up to the property line and slightly over, naturally. The pool has been in use since it was built. It was actually, pool building got a certificate of occupancy in 2011, inspected off, all of that. So the question is, how did this happen? And why are we here tonight? Inadvertently, small portions of the pool, that is the steps as I've shown you, and the pool building were built over the property line. They're built over the property line to lot 684, which is also known as 105 Spitbrook Road. Right in here. And it became a sort of natural occurrence because both of these properties are part of the Twin Ponds apartment complex. And if you ever go in there, it looks like one complex. It's not a sequence of 2 different or 3 different apartment complexes that are distinctly different from one another. Effectively, what we believe happened was, even though this was laid out on the site plan and conceivably even staked in the area, not totally sure, but conceivably, the pool contractor probably didn't properly locate the pool vis-a-vis the location shown on the site plan because of the kind of overall nature of what you see there. That is an integrated whole. The 2 applicants, Brook Village North Associates Limited Partnership and National Investors, they have common principles. They're not the same, but the same gentlemen who established both years ago have entities which are the principals in both. Actually, one of the principals, Jerry Levin, is here with me. He's the one who signed for both applicants on this application. So the nature of this property, the kind of integrated whole that you see as an apartment complex, the sort of fact that the property line doesn't really, they're not as distinct, if you will, in the mind of anyone who's not looking at a set of plans and legal descriptions and the like, I think lent to this issue. It wasn't discovered until this past September when this as-built plan was done. The pool is used by the residents of both 201 Brook Village Road, lot 646, as well as 105 Spitbrook, lot 684, and at least 2 other parcels as well. There's a common easement for use of recreational facilities that exists among these properties that's been in place for over 30 years, so that the recreational components of these properties are used in common by the residents of both complexes and even beyond. So the amenity is for common use of both and others. And it's in a location that facilitates that. As you outlined at the outset of the meeting, Mr. Chairman, an equitable waiver is granted if 4 criteria are met. An equitable waiver is a sort of statutory creature. It was created by our legislature a number of years ago to try to accommodate inadvertent type of dimensional or field layout issues rather than having to go through the formalities of the variance process in those particular cases. So if I may, I'll paraphrase each of the criteria and then just supplement a little bit of what we talked about in our application. We detailed in our application the rationale in support of each of the 4 criteria, which if you've had a chance to read it, I think you'll see how it falls into place vis-a-vis the description I've given you of this property. So the first criteria is that how the violation was not noticed or discovered by an owner, agent, representative, or municipal official until the structure had been substantially completed. As I noted, it hadn't been discovered until this past September when this as-built plan was done. It obviously wasn't discovered during the construction time frame because the certificate of occupancy was issued for the pool building. Building permit was issued in advance of that as well. And it's not like it was 100 feet away from where the site plan contemplated. It was a little bit of tight quarters. The site plan called for it to be close to the property line at 684, but was built over those few feet. And again, I sort of attribute that, I believe, to just the kind of integrated nature in which this project was done and it functions. This property is commonly managed, by the way, as well, And at this time frame, 2009, 2010, a substantial renovation was done where, in effect, these buildings were fully replaced overall in the Twin Ponds complex. Second criteria is how was the violation not an outcome of ignorance of the law or ordinance, failure to inquire, misrepresentation, or bad faith, but rather a good faith error. The pool and the pool building were shown on the approved site plan, so obviously they were brought up front before the planning board, an intended amenity and improvement on this property, not undertaken where they weren't shown on the plan and then suddenly materialized, but were in fact shown on the plan and intended to be processed in good faith and in the proper location. Third criteria is explain how the physical or dimensional violation does not constitute a public or private nuisance, nor diminish the value of other property in the area or interfere with present or future uses. Because the pool is set up to benefit and be used by both properties, 646 and 684, among others, it's obviously not a nuisance, but rather an amenity used for both and others. It's shared by those residents. It's also not in a location that causes a nuisance for one property or the other because they're managed as an integrated whole. The only properties that are involved in this matter are those two properties owned by the applicants, Brook Village North and National Investors. And given that common usage, common applicant before you, there's obviously no adverse property value impact as a result of the pool being located a little bit over the property line as well as the pool building so located. The fourth criteria and the last criteria is explain how, due to the degree of past construction or investment made in ignorance of the facts, the cost to correct far outweighs any public benefit to be gained, and it would be inequitable to require the violation to be corrected. So in this case, I think it's fairly obvious that the inadvertent nature of the construction where it was built, the finding out about it 2 months or so ago, the unintentional consequence that occurred, and the fact that moving it, that is undoing the pool, taking it apart, taking the building down, relocating them a few feet over, the cost to do that versus the benefit gained is certainly not at balance. It's clearly a cost factor that to undo this, reconstruct both, the cost to do that would far outweigh any public benefit, certainly recognizing that there's not a public interest being adversely affected, given that there are two private property owners under common management in an integrated apartment complex. We would respectfully submit, Mr. Chairman, that the four criteria are adequately present in this case, that the waiver should be granted. And again, we appreciate your time very much and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Shaw?
I guess I'm curious as to whether at least there was any consideration for a transfer of a small portion of land between the two property owners that would have essentially completely relieved this situation. Was that contemplated, and is there some reason why that's maybe less appealing of an option than this?
Yeah, I gave that some thought when I first became aware of this as well, because it's another approach. But you have significant mortgages on both properties, so you're involving lenders that's not easy to do. It's doable, obviously. You also have to fully engineer two plans, lot line adjustment plans, submit them to the planning board, explain all of that. And you really don't change reality, because the physical reality is the same, and the lot line change would be something all of us would see, but the users would never see, and it would be really academic to them. That was the thought process.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Attorney Westgate?
Thank you,
All
Mr.
set.
Chairman. Thank you.
Is there anybody else to speak in favor of the proposed equitable waiver at 201 Brook Village Road? Anyone else in favor? Anyone else with questions or concerns? Questions or concerns? 201 Brook Village Road? Not seeing any, so I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Thoughts, Mr. Shaw?
I mean, this looks like it could almost be perhaps a kind of a textbook kind of example case for why you have something like this. I mean, especially when you have essentially the common ownership. Obviously, it's slightly different, but the reality is you don't really have, I think, what truly amounts to an aggrieved party. It's such a minor thing. All the circumstances clearly kind of satisfy their criteria. It seems very straightforward to me. You know, happy to have had that explanation. I do think this does, you know, seem like a definitely more clear and simple and straightforward way to take care of this in this situation. So.
Thank you. Mr. Lionel?
I have nothing to add. It's very straightforward. I don't see a problem with it.
Mr. Welch?
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. I think all the criteria has been met.
Mr. Boucher?
I agree with what's being said.
And Ms. McKay?
I agree with what's already been previously stated.
And I agree as well. Just one comment, it's probably the most unusual property line. Like when I went to look at the site, I'm in like that parking lot, and the property line kind of runs right across the stripes of the parking lot, you know, parking spaces there. And, you know, if you had seen it, certainly that pool is an in-ground pool. The pool house is built with a foundation. It's not like a shed. It's a very well permanently constructed, and it just really more support to the fact that it would be a huge undertaking to move that over. Anybody like to make a motion? Mr. Shaw?
Sure. I'd like to make a motion on behalf of the owner, Brook Village North Associates Limited Partnership. The address is 201 Brook Village Road, and again, the request is for an equitable waiver of dimensional requirement to maintain an in-ground swimming pool, pool deck, pool house, and related fencing located over the lot line, and this is in an RC zone. The equitable waiver, the 4 criteria this board believes are met. That the first being that the violation was not noticed or discovered by any owner, former owner, owner's agent, or representative, or municipal official until the structure in violation had been substantially completed, or until after a lot or other division of land in violation had been subdivided by conveyance. It's clear that based on the timeline of the construction of the pool, that this has been in use for approximately 6+ years, and there had been no identification until this as-built plan was undertaken. Secondly, that the violation was not an outcome of ignorance of the law, ordinance, failure to inquire, obfuscation, misrepresentation, or bad faith on the part of the owner or owner's agent or representative, but was instead caused by either a good faith error in measurement or by an error in ordinance interpretation or applicability made by a municipal official in the process of issuing a permit. And clearly, by, again, all accounts, this appears to have just been created by a deviation in the actual construction of the pool and the pool house from the original site plan. And while it's not completely clear as to exactly why there was this slight shift, it never really came to anyone's attention, including the city's issuance of certificates of occupancy, et cetera. Thirdly, that the physical or dimensional violation does not constitute a public or private nuisance, nor diminish the value of other property in the area, nor interfere with or adversely affect any present or future uses of such property. Again, as we heard through testimony and application, these 2 affected properties are, while in separate ownership, have the same principles in the ownership groups for the 2, and have no adverse effects on either property. And again, that this is actually such a minor issue that, in fact, also the lot line is not perceptible to anyone that would be visiting these affected properties, other than by guidance of a plot plan that would allow one to navigate and see exactly where things are, but no obvious appearance that there is any incursion from one property to the other. And fourthly, that due to the degree of past construction or investment made in ignorance of the facts constituting the violation, the cost of correction so far outweighs any public benefit to be gained that it would be inequitable to require the violation to be corrected. Again, these are fairly significant structures, and to go through the process of a removal and a reconstruction would serve no benefit to the public or to these property owners, and thus it would be not worthy to correct it for those reasons. So with having met those four criteria, the motion is to approve this equitable waiver.
And Mr. Lionel's hand is in the air for a second. Any discussion on the motion? I just had one thought that came to mind. It's interesting that Attorney Westgate said that going through us versus a planning board was the easier route. Guess we can take that as a compliment, huh? A show of hands in favor of the approval of the equitable waiver, so that's 5. So that's approved, so good luck with that. And as always, there's a 30-day window of appeal. I know you know about that. You can advise your clients. And with that, I'll close the I'll close the public meeting on case number 1, and we'll move right along. I'll open the public hearing on case number 2. The owner is Thomas and Melissa Bruneau. The address is 29 Marlowe Road. The request is the following. First, a special exception. The special exception is to allow an accessory in-law dwelling unit, and then also 2 variances. The first variance is to exceed maximum driveway width. 24 feet is allowed. There's existing 24 feet driveway width, an additional 12-foot proposed on Browning Road for a total of 36 feet. And then the second variance is to allow a new and second curb cut on Browning Avenue. Sorry, not Browning Road. This is in the R8 zone, Ward 8. Hi, good evening. If you'd like to give us your name and address and walk us through your application.
Thomas Bruno, 29 Marlowe Road. I'm the applicant. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. So what we're seeking is a special exception for an accessory dwelling unit for an in-law apartment for my mother-in-law over there. We believe we're meeting all the guidelines, other than a few things I'll note. It's going to be proposed at 750 square feet. That actually works out quite well, and more than enough room to accommodate her. It's attached to the house as required. It will be no external requirement to go between the units, so it's all interior. There is no new entrance on either Marlowe Road or Browning Ave, so no new entrance. On the variance side, we are requesting the curb cut, and I'd like to go into that just a little bit. So in an effort to make this as minimal impact on the lot and in the neighborhood, what in effect we have is this 25 by 30 foot accessory dwelling that will look pretty much just like an addition. In order to have a driveway, to have it come out of the unit to go to our driveway would be very difficult to do with the grade of the lot. And so in that respect, we're going to put a drive-under garage and have it come out onto Browning Avenue so that it blends in better with the area, works better with the grade. So that's where the variance for the curb cut and the additional driveway width comes into play, because the 24 feet is going to be used up by our existing two-car garage on the Marlowe Road side. So we're proposing the 12-foot on the Browning Ave side. It'll be, I believe it's 75 feet from the intersection, so that doesn't create any hazards to any people in the area, any neighbors. I believe there's required to have 1 off-street parking at the driveway. And I already covered the interior the fact that it's an interior door between the existing property and accessory dwelling. And I believe that covers all the points that are required. We plan to do this with the same general contractor that built the house for us about 5 years ago. All the same type of materials, all the same fits and finishes inside and out, so it doesn't look really any different than the rest of the house. And like I say, we're trying to go from, minimal impact on the area, on the lot. So any trees that are coming down and things like that to accommodate the construction in the driveway, we're going to replant, replant in the spring. Try to get that all, actually looking better than it is right now, because that area is just a overgrown wooded space that was there from the original lot. Believe that more or less covers it.
All right, let's see if we have any questions. Are there any questions for Mr. Bruno? I guess I have Mr. Boucher, go right ahead.
Maybe you covered, but we just need to hear that, talk about the accessory dwelling unit that the
Yeah, let's,
applicant understands the 9 points that he'll be agreeing to.
Sure, let's walk through that. So with any accessory dwelling unit, there's 9 points of law. Have you seen those? Are you familiar with those?
Yes.
Okay. So the first, I think you've covered in your testimony, you said the accessory dwelling unit will be clearly incidental and subordinate to the use and does not exceed 750 square feet.
Correct.
And it's the accessory dwelling unit shall be the only accessory dwelling unit within the same lot as the single-family dwelling.
Correct.
Number 3, the accessory dwelling unit shall not alter the single-family character or appearance of a single-family dwelling or its conformity with the character of the neighborhood.
Correct. So, and that was what I was speaking about, how it's going to blend with the rest of the house, same materials, no new entrances on either road front.
Okay. Number 4,
He needs a variance for that one there.
yeah. So,
New code.
I guess let's hold a second on number 3. Like 3A is no new entrance or exit to an accessory dwelling unit shall be constructed on the front or frontage side of the single-family dwelling. And that's not on the case of Marlowe Road. B is that no new curb cut from the street shall be constructed, but that's what you're asking for the variance for.
Correct.
C is that the exterior design of the accessory dwelling unit shall be compatible with the existing unit, which I think you said is just going to be the same.
Yes, it's same fit and finishes, same materials. I submitted some drawings of what the proposed looks like, and it blends right in with the rest of the house.
So criteria 4 for an accessory dwelling unit is that the owner of the property must occupy either the primary or accessory dwelling unit as the owner's principal place of residence for a period of at least 5 years following the granting of the certificate of occupancy for the accessory dwelling unit.
Correct.
So your testimony is that you're not
have
planning
no
on
plans
moving
on-
or getting sick and remaining completely healthy, right?
I hope we're all very healthy for a very long time.
All right. Number 5 is that the owner of the property shall provide the city of Nashua with a covenant for filing with the Hillsborough County Registry of Deeds along with the appropriate filing fees. The covenant shall read, I'm not going to go through that paragraph. If you read that in your
Yes.
testimony is that you will be providing that?
Absolutely, that's not a problem at all.
Okay. And kind of like in summary of points 4 and 5 is that, the occupant will be blood relative, which your testimony is it's your mother-in-law?
Yes.
Mother-in-law,
she's
yes.
Sitting right over there. She's
All
a
right.
lovely lady.
Number 6 is that 1 additional off-street parking space is required above the minimum standard for a single-family home.
Right, and I will have that. There's actually going to have a drive-under garage, but yes, there'll be room to park.
Okay, number 7, an interior door shall be provided between the primary dwelling unit and the accessory dwelling unit.
Correct.
Number 8 is that the single-family dwelling and the accessory dwelling unit shall not be separated in ownership.
Correct. We own the whole property.
And number 9, the accessory dwelling units shall only be associated with single-family detached dwellings and not manufactured housings.
Correct.
All right. Were there any other questions for Mr. Bruno? I guess I have a question on your testimony about, like, the topographical challenges,
Yes.
thus, requiring the driveway to be on Browning. When I site walk your property, and I gotta say, you got a beautiful house.
Thank you.
Love that stonework. But if you're standing on the front of your house, on the Browning Road side, it kinda goes down, and I'm thinking, well, that's the topographical challenge. You kinda gotta span that with your driveway, and it would've just seemed to me that it would be easier to come out of your existing driveway. So I just was wondering if you could help me understand what topography is the challenge.
Sure.
Because I thought, to me, it's like the topography that you're trying to span with the proposed driveway.
Okay, so if you consider the fact that it's a drive-under garage, so now you're already down a lower level, approximately 8 feet down, 9 feet down from the existing grade. That 8 or 9 feet down is within a foot of the grade of Browning Avenue at that point where the driveway would come out. So it creates a nice level driveway for somebody, so it's not a hill or an incline to go to the garage. If I was to try to come around, I would end up pretty much decimating that whole side yard, and it would just look like a paved parking lot out there, and I just think it would look bad, and I wouldn't want to see it. I don't think anyone else would. This is going to be, there'll be some retaining walls along the driveway, and it'll be landscaped, and, it'll fit right in with the area.
So is it the proposed accessory dwelling unit, is it gonna be like a one-door garage, and is that gonna be like dug into the ground then? Is it gonna be excavating out with a retaining wall on the left and right?
Correct, right. It's either a single or a two-car garage. It might be easier to put the 2 doors in just for the fact of, having a snow blower or something. You don't have to back a car out to get the snow blower by it. But she only has 1 car, so, but that was the thought process. And of the existing neighbors, 3 of the houses that are direct abutters all have multiple curb cuts on their driveways. One has actually 3 curb cuts. So the second curb cut is really keeping in light of the same of many of the other houses in the area.
Okay, I didn't notice that. Which, we say the houses that, are they the ones on the other corners, the other 3 corners?
The other
have-
corners, yeah.
They have multiple curb cuts?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't notice that, but thank you for pointing that out. And then the other question I have is on the proposed addition. Is it gonna be 2 stories, and is the height of the roof gonna be equivalent to the existing roof, or how's
It's
that?
a single story, and so the height of the addition will be the same as the height of the regular, of the existing house.
Okay, I don't think this was in our package.
Yeah, it's on the back page.
Yeah.
Oh, it is?
It's on the
Oh,
back of
I
it.
just didn't look on the back page, sorry. All right, we got that here. Well, thank you.
Yes, so it will look like the rest of the house. It's gonna look, from the Marlow Road side, it'll look like just an addition that was put on the side.
Mr. Shaw has a question for you.
I guess I'd like, even though we walked through the criteria, I guess I'd like to explore a little bit, especially, I think it's point 1, about that the accessory dwelling unit shall be clearly incidental and subordinate extent, use, and purpose to the primary structure, not so the size we've already covered. So there's that part. And then the first part of number 3, that the accessory dwelling unit shall not alter the single-family character or appearance of the single-family dwelling, or its conformity with the character of the neighborhood. I guess my concern is that when I look at the plan and see, as proposed at least here, two-car garages, and they face the two different streets, I realize there's some separation of that, but to me, there's a certain feel that this feels more like a duplex or two units. So yes, I guess there's not necessarily a new entry door for, people associated with the other facade and the extension, but the two-car garages, I guess I'd like to kind of understand, why you feel it doesn't kind of go beyond what, to me, it seems like the criteria is saying versus what you're proposing.
I believe that it's just another garage on an existing house. It doesn't, without an entrance, a front entrance or anything like that with the house, I don't believe that it would feel like a duplex. It just looks like a garage. If the original, the existing house, I could have had the garage doors on the other side, it wouldn't look any different than that. You driving up Browning Avenue, you would go in on a driveway on Browning Avenue, there would be garage doors there. So it really doesn't, to me, seem any different than what I could have built it that way originally. I could, if it was more appealing to everybody, I could make it a single garage door. It doesn't matter. I was trying to do some, make an attempt to have it balance and kind of look even and all this, but I'm not an architect, so it just looked better to me. But could be a single car garage door. It really doesn't matter. But I think it really, I don't think it delineates the space any by having a door there, personally, but that's my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Boucher?
And again, the reason for the garage is as you're trying to provide a covered parking space for your
Correct.
mother-in-law.
Yes.
Right, okay.
Yeah, that's the whole intent. I wouldn't want to see her parking outside and trudging through the snow. I'm afraid she might take my spot and make me do that, actually.
Any other questions? I guess just one other point I had was rather recently, there was an amendment to the accessory dwelling ordinance. And yeah, I guess I focus in, I'm looking at that ordinance O-17-036, which was adopted May 16th of this year. And
That's all this.
and yeah, just, I struggle with the spirit and intent of that 3A where it says no new entrance or exit shall be constructed on the front or frontage side. And that's the way it's and I look, well, this, technically it's not the front, it's the side, but it was the spirit and intent of that language to when you add a garage door on the side, is that a new entranceway, Mr. Shaw?
Well, I mean, actually, maybe we explore this more in our own, in the public meeting, but I would think that typically because of other things that we've now experienced over maybe the last 5-10 years with corner lots, we do treat the two sides facing the two streets as frontage, and we treat those with front yard setbacks and all the other criteria. So we might want to explore that a little further, and maybe we want to ask the applicant a little bit about that as well, because I hadn't thought about it exactly that way before, but it's kind of, as you started talking about that, it kind of made me recognize that when we have had corner lots, that's been a big part of what we've, property owners have been subjected to. Oftentimes, it's been very constraining for different reasons because of those, increased setbacks. So this might be something that applies here as well.
Well, I'm not sure if it is boiling down maybe to a question for you, Mr. Bruno. It's just, I guess, in terms of the accessory dwelling unit, the state has been moving in a direction, and so has the city as well, to really encourage those. I mean, it's being encouraged in the sense because it keeps families together longer, and as people age and children move out, there might be one person left behind who can't hold on to a big property. So there's a trend in this state that's happening, and there's a trend to encourage the accessory dwelling unit. Here in this city, the language we have is to keep it looking like one unit, and I guess, I have a bit of pause about the garage door, but I don't know, it's not a hang-up, it's just, I guess, an observation of where I'm at. We'll see what else we hear tonight.
Sure. We looked at many options and went through many designs, and really couldn't find another option that, with the grade of the lot, that was less of an impact. If there was a garage, I really need to have a garage door for her so she can have her car inside. And unfortunately, without decimating the yard, it's really, I just couldn't come up with another option. And with corner lot, as you say, there's two sides. Where else would I put this garage door? It would be more of an impact to the neighbor behind us if I tried to put something on the back of the house, because there would be cars driving around the backside. I really don't. I just don't see another option.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Mr. Shaw?
I guess maybe you did explore this option then, since it sounds like maybe you noted different things, but did you look at the possibility of how it might work to essentially just have done a third garage bay, basically consistent with the two existing, and keep us, most of the addition just all to that level? I mean, whether you have a basement foundation or not, but completely not have the second any under garage, not have the additional curb cut. Was that something that was explored?
Yeah,
Is there something that doesn't really work for that?
Yes, we did look into that, and one of the issues there was I really wanted to keep the property far back from the setback lines. So currently, we're about 22, 25 feet back from the setback. I didn't want to encroach on the setback. I didn't want the front of the house to become this massive long, because in all effect, it's a one-story house. There's some finished rooms downstairs, but it's in effect a one-story house from the front. And I just thought that, the look of having a massive front with another garage and then the accessory dwelling next to it, it was going to just look funny in the neighborhood, and it would take up the width of the whole lot. This seemed to be, less impact on the lot.
Thank you.
Mr.
I was just gonna say that, thank you, that it is a corner lot, so there are two front yard setbacks on Marlowe and on Browning, and the other two are side yards. And also, as far as the addition goes, if this was just an addition without an in-law unit, all he would be here for is just the additional driveway width of 36 feet. The other two issues would not be here. Because it's really the kitchen that makes this an in-law apartment. If there's no kitchen, it wouldn't be an in-law, and it would just be an addition, and he could almost do this by right.
Right, any other questions? I think we're all set. You can have a seat.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anybody else to speak in favor of the proposed in-law at 29 Marlowe Road? Anyone else in favor? Is there anyone with questions, concerns, or opposition? I see a fella here. If you'd like to come to the microphone and give us your name and address and let us know what's on your mind.
My name is Levi Thomas, and I'm at 71 Browning Avenue. I don't see a problem with what he's doing. I think it's a fantastic idea as far as the curb cut on the second side of Browning Avenue side. I have a curb cut on Browning Avenue side and Scott Avenue side, myself. The only concern I have here with this is that flooding, water runoff downstream from him. I live below. As long as there's grading, I don't see any problems with what he's doing. I think it's good to keep your family together and bring your mother home with you.
All right.
So, but my concern, and the only one I have, is groundwater seepage coming downstream to me. Other
Well-
than that, it's fine.
We'll ask Mr. Bruneau that in a few minutes, and I see that his survey here is, by a local civil engineer, so see if we get some answers on what's going to happen with water runoff, because really, by law, the post-development runoff can't exceed the pre-development runoff. And, but I'd rather have Mr. Bruneau speak to that instead of me.
Right.
So thank you for your question, and, we have a question for you.
Just want to clarify exactly where on Browning then you are?
I'm directly behind him. I'm directly behind him.
Okay.
The two garages, that would be nice looking. I have two on the same side. It's not an issue.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Well, thanks for that comment. Is there anybody else with questions or concerns? We have a fella here, if you'd like to come. Can I see a show of hands of who else is going to speak with questions or concerns? I see two more hands after this fella. Hi, good evening. Could you give us your name and address for the record?
My name is David Long. I live at 32 Marlow Road.
Good evening, Mr. Long.
Good evening. My only concern was when I looked at the description and the plans online, the word duplex kind of leapt to mind. I would just hope it doesn't look like that in the end, because I would feel that would devalue my house if the neighborhood started looking like a multifamily dwelling setup. I also wondered about the drainage. It does not affect me, though, because I'm uphill. But I could see someone else would be concerned, because drainage on that hill is such a problem. And as a disclaimer, if you were there and looked up the hill from the front of their house, you would see my house, which has multiple driveway cuts. So,
I think Mr. Shaw's just, have you seen the plan?
I did, yes,
Okay.
this was on the webpage, although I was looking for minutes of what might have been a previous meeting on this, and they weren't online, so I don't know if this has been discussed at an earlier meeting.
Well, what might have happened, this was on the agenda a couple of meetings ago, but it was postponed, so there was no discussion.
Okay.
We're pretty tight about that. It's either discussed or not, and for whatever reason, it wasn't our doing. I'm assuming the applicant maybe wasn't ready or something, but it was postponed, so there was no discussion.
Is it
or
re-advertised?
It's a re-advertising.
Oh, okay, it was re-advertised, so there was.
That was the word in the agenda I saw for tonight, but I didn't understand what that meant.
One of the variances was inadvertently overlooked and was added in this time. So.
And we wouldn't want to have a public meeting or public hearing if it's incorrectly advertised, especially at a lower, if it's advertised incorrectly at a lower excursion from the zoning book. Are there any questions for Mr. Long? I guess I have one point. There's that 9 criteria for an accessory dwelling, an in-law. There's a lot of language there, and the deed that goes to the Hillsborough County Registry of Deeds is all language that doesn't permit a duplex. I mean, a duplex is very different than an in-law apartment, namely the blood relative. Have there been violations of that? I'm sure that somewhere in the city, there's some in-laws that probably are a duplex and are under the radar screen, but that's an improper, illegal use of an in-law apartment. This is clearly would be for a blood relative. If in the future, when owners move on, if there wasn't a blood relative to occupy that, it would not be a duplex. It could just go away. The kitchen could come out and it would just be whatever, a big playroom or something. So I did want to say that there's a pretty clear distinction between an accessory dwelling unit and a duplex.
I did see that language, and I appreciate that that's there. So that moderates my concern a little bit, but I just still wanted to be on the record about that being a little bit of a concern for me.
Sure. Well, we appreciate you coming tonight and letting us know that concern, Mr. Long. Any other questions? I think we're all set. You could have a seat. I think I saw a fellow with a hand up over there. Would you like to let us, give us your name and address and let us know what's on your mind? If you have something, is that something to hand out to us, or is that
Yeah,
notes?
it's a memo that I'll be reading from, so
Okay,
I'll pass it
just-
out afterwards.
All right, have at it.
Thank you.
Again, your name and address for the record, so we get it
My
right.
name is John Chapitis, and I'm here with my wife Elizabeth,
All right.
and we are here to
Could I trouble you to spell that last name, because,
C-E, P as in Peter,
uh-huh,
A-I, T as in Tom,
uh-huh.
I, S as in Sam.
All right, she's got it. And what's your address?
16 Shakespeare Road.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you. My wife and I have been residents of this city for more than 50 years. We moved here in 1964, and we've been residents in the Lancashire Heights area since 1970. And we're here to not speak against the concept of an in-law apartment, but our concern is for the future that the nature of Lancashire Heights may change. Now, I probably won't be around here 10 years from now, and some of you will not have your positions any longer. But my concern is that at some point in time, new owners to this property, or the current owners, may say that they would like to change this property into a duplex because it's no longer being used as a in-law apartment. So, in 5 years, somebody could come back and say that they want to change, they bought the house, they want to change it. And we recently had to deal with the planning board because at the corner of Scott and Browning, that lot was subdivided into 2 lots. 2 smaller lots than what typically is found in the Lancashire Heights area. So we see changes that are being forced on us because various boards feel they can't do anything to prevent it. For example, the planning board said, well, it meets all the regulations. It meets the standard of 18,000 square feet in terms of lot size, so there was enough to create 2 lots that exceeded 18,000, but it's less than the majority of lots, or almost all the lots, in the Lancashire Heights area. In the deeds of all the property owners, there's a stipulation that no duplex can be built. Now, the problem is, of course, that this development was built or was approved prior to 1960. And it doesn't have the force of the City of Nashua law. So if you prove this tonight, then the only remedy that we would have as residents in Lancashire Heights, should some future Board of Zoning approve changing of this property into allowing a duplex, would be to file a civil case against the owners who have gotten zoning approval to change it to a duplex. So I think that this is a kind of a slippery slope by creating an environment in this plan that allows 2 separate entrances to that building. Again, I'm not opposed to the idea of providing services to somebody's family. In fact, the next door neighbor to us has originally, back in 1970, had an in-law apartment, but they only had 1 single driveway. And in subsequent ownership, those owners used the in-law apartment and created a great room, so to speak, in its usage. So my concern, again, is that we're seeing a change being created in the Lancashire Heights area that is much, much different than what the original developers and what the original property owners in the Lancashire Heights area had approved. In some parts of the city, the older parts of the city, I would dare say that this kind of a proposal would not be looked upon with great favor. And it just seems to me that this is probably one of the first challenges, so to speak, of the new ordinance that was passed in June.
If I could kindly ask you to speed up here, your 5 minutes is up.
Okay.
You just want to try to,
I've made my point.
okay. Let's see if there's any questions for you. Are there any questions for Mr.
Chapitis.
Chapitis?
Chapitis.
Chapitis.
Thank you.
Chapitis. Thank you. Chapitis. Any questions? I guess I just have a couple of thoughts on your presentation. And again, there's a very large difference between a duplex and an in-law apartment, and that is the blood relative and aspect of it. And again, with the aging population of New Hampshire, it has been advocating and welcoming that. And whether it's Lancashire Heights or around town or around the state, it is a growing trend. More and more is happening with accessory dwelling units. But in terms of the possibility of a slippery slope to a duplex, there's no right to, if this were granted, or any accessory dwelling unit, that's not a right for a duplex, and that would be an illegal use. It would have to, but anybody in the state, anybody in the city could ask for a duplex, and would have to come to this board, and that's a much higher bar to get over than an accessory dwelling unit. So I hear what you're saying, but I don't feel the accessory dwelling unit and duplex is that much of a slippery slope. And just one other point on that other property, that didn't come to us because it had more size. I hear what you're saying, that when that one was subdivided, it was smaller. I think you said 18,000 square feet each. It was maybe smaller than most of the properties at Lancashire Heights, but the owners had the right to do that by right, and that's why it wasn't here at this board, because there wasn't any variance or special exception needed.
Well, I understand that. I understand that.
Okay.
All I'm saying is that, again, none of us will be here probably when someone comes with the same, a developer, not a homeowner, but a developer who bought the property and will say that it's a hardship to him or the company to have a single-family dwelling, and they can make better use of the property if they were allowed to put a duplex. It may be a higher standard, but it's still going to be a board like this sitting that will make that final decision. And I just I'm just concerned about it.
I think Mr. Lionel had a question for you also.
Well, just a couple of comments. I thought I heard you suggest that there was going to be a second entrance for this in-law apartment, and there is not. And there's a garage, but
Well,
that
the
doesn't...
second entrance, I'm speaking of the driveways.
Yeah, well, okay. And as we were talking earlier, the owner has to agree to a covenant which, with the wording includes, the continued use of the accessory dwelling unit is conditioned upon compliance with all current and subsequently adopted ordinances and statutes applicable to the property. That makes it very difficult for a significant change of usage of the property. Yes, anything could happen, but that's really true with anything that we do here.
Living here in Nashua since 1964, I've seen a lot of strange things happen coming before different municipal boards.
All I can say is that's the sort of thing that we would be very skeptical.
I'm just here voicing my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Long. I'm sorry, Chapitis. I think there's one other hand. After our alderwoman, was there anybody else? I just want to look at one more time. Speak. Okay, so this will be the last in opposition.
Thank
Good
you.
evening, welcome back.
Thank you.
Again, if you could give us your name and address for the
Marianne
recording.
Melizzi Golia, 2 Amble Road. I think that the speakers before me have pretty much summed up the concerns of residents. Some of the people that have talked to me about this property, there's a concern that by granting the variance for a second curb cut and having either 1 or 2 garages coming off of that new driveway, you're setting the stage for after 5 years when the owner no longer has to use it as a primary residence, that or with a new owner, that could become rental and it could become 2-family. Or, as you've heard some of the previous speakers, there's a concern that at some point in the future, someone will come in and ask for a variance to wall the door between the current primary and the accessory and put an outside entrance in to make that what is currently proposed as an accessory dwelling another primary dwelling. And so I think that the biggest concern is that by having that second curb cut, you are setting the stage for something in the future that is not in keeping with the neighborhood. So I don't think any of the opposition I've heard is around the accessory dwelling. It's, okay, if the garage were up using the same driveway with the accessory dwelling behind it and just an enclosed basement on the Browning side, fine. But by the design people are seeing and what's been put out here, and this is obviously a 2-car garage, which some people have said, oh, well, we could close one of the bays and make it an entrance and make a private entrance. That's where the concern is arising. It's that second curb cut kind of sets the stage for something happening in the future to make that either 2-family rental or, again, the primary owner renting it to someone who is not a family member 10 or 12 years down the line. So in terms of the notion of an accessory dwelling, I don't think anyone's in opposition to that. It's just the design we're being presented with.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions for Ms. Melizzi? I guess I have a question
Sure.
for you. And it's back to that paragraph 3A, because I think you were one of the authors of this, or
I chaired the committee. I'm not going to tell you I was one of the authors. It was a committee effort. Actually, the state authored something. It was sent to the Board of Aldermen. The Board of Aldermen had to respond by a deadline that was set by the state, and it came from the Board of Aldermen to Planning and Economic Development, where we had numerous meetings, and something was crafted for Nashua and then sent to the full Board of Aldermen where it was approved.
I see. Because on that 3A about no new entrance or exit to an accessory dwelling unit shall be constructed on front or frontage side of the single-family dwelling, I guess like with the proposed garage doors, do you think it meets that test, that is a second entrance or not really because it's not a door? Or, you know, people always say, what did the founding fathers mean with that Second Amendment right? And here we have somebody who authored it, so I have to
No, I'm
ask
not
the
going to tell you
question.
I authored this because there was lively discussion about this piece of legislation and how it was going to open the door for something. May I have additional time?
Oh, yeah, no, once we start asking
Okay.
questions.
All right, I didn't want someone thinking I'm going beyond my
Nope.
time here.
You were just a minute or two and you were done, so
And
ahead of
I
that.
think that, you know, people, in conversation, people look at that and say, well, you know, it's a garage door, it's a door, it's an entrance. You know, in the crudest definition, it's an entrance. And then looking at that and saying, well, if someone buys the house in 15 years, what is it going to take to say, okay, we're going to wall off one of the garage doors and actually like partially finish that and put a proper door in and have a mudroom? So maybe there are too many home design shows, so people are kind of looking at spaces saying, how could they be redesigned? But those are the concerns I've had, or I've heard, and it's not, again, the accessory dwelling per se, it's the fact that by having that second curb cut and that second access with either a 1 or 2 car garage with the living area above, which is a complete living area, you may be laying the groundwork for rental property, or even, you know, 15 years from now, the house gets sold and someone comes in and hides something in there. I mean, we know it happens in the city. We know there are illegal apartments. So those are the concerns that I've heard.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Shaw has a question for you.
Yes.
It's either for Alderwoman Melizzi-Golio or maybe Mr. Falk. So I guess the thing I'm still not completely clear as we've moved to this new accessory dwelling unit, and we were stating it earlier, but I don't see anything in the special criteria that actually says the blood relative is required.
Oh,
That was removed
That,
out.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, okay, that's what I thought, that it's about the principle. I mean, the owner has
Oh,
to
yeah.
live within one of the
Thank you for
structures
correcting
for the
that.
5 years, but, so to actually, obviously, there's the thing about maybe the extra entrance, okay, but I didn't think there was still any reference to blood
No,
relative.
That was removed.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right. And again, the owner only has to be there for 5
Right,
years.
right.
So, would you like this back?
Sure, thank you.
So the unit doesn't need to be even really used by, it could be used by one of his college roommates for all we care. It doesn't really matter who's living there. As far as the entrance goes, we thought the entrance was really like the front door or a front door into this accessory dwelling unit, and not necessarily the driveway or the garage doors. Garage door is a garage door. Even a window can be classified as an entrance. You get in and out of a window as well. And so we thought, since they removed the front door from that, between the 2 garage doors, there really wasn't an entrance. The curb cut's a driveway, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of corner lots that have driveways on both streets.
All right, Mr. Bruno, if you'd like to come back, and your wife as well, that's fine. And we had the question about flooding, and or runoff, increase of runoff. Would you like to address that?
Sure. Yeah, I know what Mr. Thomas is talking about, because when it rains hard, there's a lot of water coming off that hill above me and running right down Marlow Road. The way the lot is pitching now, it all goes down towards Mr. Thomas's yard and towards Browning Avenue. What we'll do with the grading is create it so the runoff does not go towards his yard. It'll be a slight dip down, so it goes to more towards our yard, and then out to the drainage in the street. And the actual final grade has to be approved by the city engineer. We have to go and make sure they're comfortable with how the grading is going to be laid out. So they have the final word on how the grading is done, because their goal is to also protect the neighbors and the streets and all the systems out there. So.
All right, thank you. Was there, in terms of what we've heard about the driveway, the second entrance, did you have any thoughts you wanted to discuss on that or bring?
I think she does.
Oh, okay,
Melissa Bruno, 29 Marlow Road.
welcome.
Thank you. Married 30 years, so he knows. So I just want to make sure that I understand something. We're here to do the right thing and to do the right thing for our neighbors and our neighborhood and to respect the integrity and to not have drainage down on you. And I've talked to your barber about this. If I boil this down to one thing, it's a kitchen. That's what I'm boiling this down to, because I have the right to put an addition on my house. I have the right to put a garage into that addition. I can do anything I want within that addition. I can connect it to my garage. I could put 4 doors on it if I wanted to, on the Marlowe side or on the Browning Ave side. So this discussion comes down to the fact that it's a kitchen that makes it an in-law apartment. Do I understand that correctly?
Basically, I mean, anybody can put an addition on a house as long as it meets the setbacks and open space and other dimensional criteria that's in our zoning code.
Correct.
There are many houses that have two front doors on the front of their house. My house does.
They have a garage
Side
as
doors,
part of
rear
the
doors, so
house.
that's,
They have a separate garage that maybe has a game room over the top, or it could have whatever's over the top of that, or the garage, true? So this comes down to a kitchen.
it comes down to basically the stove and the extra driveway width, really.
So I could, in theory, be just applying for the extra driveway because David, who lives across the street from us, has 2 entrances. Mr. Thomas has 3 entrances. Christine Fitzgerald on the left of us has 2 entrances. So I could be standing here instead of doing the right thing by the town or the city, asking just for a driveway cut. Is that true?
The extra 12 feet, yeah.
I just want, because I'm hearing a lot of things about a duplex. It is an in-law apartment for my mother, so that as she ages, right now she's very healthy and can hold a plank longer than I can, but when that time comes that she can't, we want the ability to take care of her, and we're trying to do everything that's correct to be respectful of everybody around us and to actually increase the property value and not decrease it. And we didn't want the massive spans across the front. We've got 1 million setback rules on a corner lot, so you start making our driveway even wider to add a 3rd car to the 2nd car, and we're clear into the setbacks on that corner. So that is why we did it. So I do understand and respect what everybody's saying, but I want people to think this comes down to a kitchen. That's what we're talking about, is the kitchen.
All right. Any questions for the Brunos? I think we're all set. You could have a seat. One and only one person who's spoken in opposition has the right to come back and speak, or they could rest, depending on the situation. So I'm looking to see if any one of the 4 want to come up, and I'm not seeing that. So I think I will close the public meeting. I'm sorry, the public hearing, and open the public meeting. Thoughts on the case? Who'd like to go first?
I'll go.
Mr. Lionel.
I certainly understand and appreciate the concerns of the neighborhood residents that they don't want to see a degradation of their neighborhood. I mean, and there are so many things that can happen to a neighborhood, subdivisions in particular. My own neighborhood has suffered from those. That what the Brunos have proposed here looks very nice, and I think is the most attractive option for creating an in-law apartment. I admit that the 2nd garage with the 2nd entrance could make it look like it was actually an independent residence. But that part of it meets all of the requirements of the city. And I'm a little reluctant to deny the request because of something that might possibly happen 10 or 15 years down the road. Now, I'm a homeowner myself. I worry about what goes on in my neighborhood. And, but there's, in fact, actually, in my neighborhood, there was somebody who got an in-law apartment and then rented it out illegally. That's no longer the case. Although it didn't have an extra garage and separate entrance like this. So I'm inclined to support it, but I understand the discomfort that the neighbors are having with it.
All right, thank you. Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, I'm still kind of, I'd like to hear, what the rest of you have to say. I've got concerns. I think some of it actually ultimately comes down to the revision of this ADU, the accessory dwelling unit definitions and all. To some degree, some of the concerns are going to be here, in any of these that we would approve in the future. And we are, all but certain to, especially that they are special exceptions. So, I think it is going to be easier for the situation to develop that a lot of people have concerns about, and that, as was just talked about, or I'm aware of in certain circumstances where there are, what have been classically in-law apartments that something changes and then those become some kind of rental unit. So there's enforcement concerns and issues there, but ultimately it isn't this board's job to say, well, we're not going to grant you that because we're concerned about what the enforcement might be or not be, or the way a property owner might choose to, adhere to the law or not going forward. We can only go by their testimony and by the evidence in front of us. So I think there are some of those concerns. I think they're real concerns, but I don't think they're things that our decisions or this board will really change one way or the other. And it's not appropriate for us to not approve these only out of the fear of what might happen or might not happen. I still do remain a little bit concerned about the kind of the two fronts, if you will, but I mean, and I can kind of see both arguments on this. I mean, to some degree, the advantage that this applicant has with a corner lot is that in many ways, it ends up presenting two different facades, so they can do the extra garage or garage doors, and it's not necessarily going to have the impact that it would if it were on just one facade, kind of to my even question there about, well, what if you had explored, the third garage bay on the front of the house. So, and I appreciate the design aspect, and, I think sometimes, yes, there's, that structure that gets to be very long can look kind of unwieldy. So I think the applicants are trying to, truly are trying to do the right thing. I think there are concerns because of the potential evolution of the neighborhood overall that, again, are beyond what we're going to decide in this case or not. And, I know a lot of people think that, we set precedents if whatever we approve from one case, and we always hear each case on its own merits, and it's not going to matter what we do on this case versus another case if it were to come before us. So I guess I still have some concerns. I think the applicants are trying to do the right thing, and I actually have full confidence that they will be good stewards of this property and go forward. I do just have some reservations still about the appearance, the possible appearance of this being more than what looks like a single-family home. So, but it's not I don't think it's necessarily a showstopper, but I could probably be, again, somewhat, interested in, again, the rest of the opinions of the board and see where everybody's at.
All right. Maybe who would like to go next? Me? I'll
Yeah.
go. I guess I'll start off with a question for Mr. Falk, and that is, on our ordinance here, it just talks about the owner of the property must occupy, doesn't, the primary or secondary, it doesn't have the 5-year, and that's what was throwing me while this talks about 5 years. And, you know, again, right, we look at the ordinance here, there's no 5-year timeout
This
on
may
it.
have been an older.
Was that an older revision?
Yeah, this is the latest and greatest, sorry to get the wrong, but now they have to live in the, one or the other for 5 years at least.
I mean, that's, I find that interesting, because after 5 years, do we still call it an in-law apartment if the owner moves out and
You know, the use would still run with, you know, with the land, what it has in the land, and, like anything else, no one knows what anything is gonna be in 5 years or 10 years from now, or even next year. Uses change, people move, people would still have, even if it's a two-family, if someone wanted to apply for a two-family, that would be a use variance. That would be an extremely aggressive request, I think, in this neighborhood, or in any R18 neighborhood. I don't know if we have hardly any, I don't know if I could even count just a few duplexes in that zoning district. This is a large lot zoning district, you know, for single family, and this is actually still gonna be a single family. It's not gonna be a two-family. I think there's been some fear of a two-family. This is not a two-family. It's a single family with an accessory dwelling unit. So it's still taxed and assessed as a single family. It's not a two-family. That's a use variance. That's a much difficult test for someone at the podium. You know, 5 years from now, if they move, or 10 years from now, someone would have to apply for a use variance, and they'd be subject to the points of law at that time. Whatever the variance points of law are in the future, we don't know. They have evolved, and, you know, they've slightly changed over the years with hardship criteria and some of the other points, but I think the board has to consider what's in front of them here. It's a special exception for the ADU. It's the extra curb cut for the driveway going into the garage and the overall driveway width. That's really what they're asking for.
Well, I'm completely fine with the accessory dwelling unit. It is the second curb cut and door that I struggle with, because that is, well, as we've all heard tonight, I feel the same way. So I'm where you are. I'm completely fine with the accessory dwelling unit. Just getting back to this language, if after 5 years, the owner moves out, it's still a single-family home, does that mean that, but it's not a blood relative?
It doesn't have to be.
I know it's not a blood relative. How is it not become a duplex?
Well, a duplex is a whole different form of someone having to satisfy a different building code, and it's assessed differently, it's taxed differently. It won't be a two-family if they decide to move and the unit's still there. They still received a special exception for the use for this property. The approvals, if there are any, building permits, the assessed value, how it's assessed is still gonna be as a single family with an accessory dwelling unit. If they sell the house to someone else, the next person who owns it, they would have to comply with using it as an accessory dwelling unit. If they don't wanna do so, they can remove the kitchen, and it can just be a house addition.
Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems like some of the inherent things that are still limiting are the fact that these are limited to 750 square feet, so they're relatively small second units, whatever they are. The nature of, there aren't typically going to be, full division of two sets of utilities. The entrances
Mailboxes.
might be a little bit tricky, because even though this speaks to not having an additional entrance, you could definitely have a dedicated entrance to some ADUs and, and not to others. And so some of that gets very much into the nature of just, I think, the physical structure and all. But I think that this legislation on the ADUs now does blur the lines. I think there's a lot more gray area between where you kind of go from something that's only could be used by one family in the past that was with that blood, relative. Now that's been removed. Now there's this 5-year kind of like timeout. And so I do think that there is something here that kind of moves it a little bit more that way, but it's still, there's a division, but it's not quite as clear anymore. Mr. Falk.
I think the city did a pretty good job with this new ordinance because, when the state had, mandates that everybody adopt new ADU laws, they were allowing a separate unit on the house, a whole separate building, a whole separate structure. So there was some concern and some fear, I think, by a lot of folks that people were gonna be turning their detached garages into apartments or ADUs. And, we heard that from numerous people, that everybody's gonna be turning a garage or a shed into a little house. But, our city, we said, that wasn't a really good direction to go in, and that they should still remain within the principal structure.
Ms. McKay?
Okay. I've listened, I'm thinking, I'm hard-pressed to say no. I'm hard-pressed to say no because an ADU was, the concept originally came, I think, because of individuals with disabilities and their families. They wanted a place for their adult sibling, child to live. So I understand the concept. You're taking care of a family member. God bless you. It's a small unit. I also understand the neighbors' concerns, but as Mrs. Bruneau noted, all the neighbors have 2 and 3 curb cuts, and they all have different access units to their property. So it's not out of character, it's in character. As far as the garage is concerned, maybe they think about 1.5 instead of 2, because he said he wanted to use that other part of the garage for storage for snow blower or equipment for the yard. The other thing is, we're looking to make a determination on something that may or may not happen in the future. That's like saying, well, maybe we'll get married, but you know what, maybe we won't, because we could get divorced 5 years from now. How about maybe we're not having children, but oops, something happened and now we are having children. Those to me seem totally out of the realm of how you make a determination or a decision. We have to make it on the facts, not on supposition or assumption. And so I'm inclined to go along with Mr. Lionel, who says it's difficult to deny, and it is difficult to deny a family wanting to take care of their family. An ADU is an ADU. It's not a duplex. It's not even a separate apartment. There are no 2 mailboxes. There are no separate heating units. There are no separate electrical units. So for me, all that criteria would have to be met for it to be a duplex. And as Mr. Falk points out, the bar is so much higher to do that. And so I would be hard-pressed, while recognizing and understanding concern for future use of our property, as any one of us who owns a home is, I still have to deal with what's in front of me, and what's in front of me is something in keeping with the neighborhood. A family wants to do the right thing, and if it weren't for a kitchen, they could pretty much do the right thing.
All right, thank you. Mr. Boucher?
I'm going to stand around and say that I support the motion, the application as a stand, and I'll tell you why. I've listened to all the testimony, and, this is not, obviously the first time we've heard concerns about post-development changes that would happen. We've heard this in the North End, where we've seen some in-laws go in, and again, I think it's a concern, and definitely in certain areas of the city, and I understand that. Sitting here, what we do is we're sitting here as the judge of the panel, and we're listening to testimony, and we have to take that for what we believe it is. I think that the testimony by the Brunos, Mr. and Mrs. Bruno, is genuine and real. So I think what they're presenting to us is exactly what they're going to do. And I don't think that I heard any neighbor say anything different, right? I think we've heard the gentleman directly behind him say he supports that, he has concerns about runoff. But I think that through the testimony, with what they're going to do, why they're doing it, and how they're gonna handle construction, I think they've kind of addressed all the issues or know that they have to address those issues. So I think they're trying to be, obviously, I think it's clear that they're trying to do the right thing, be a good steward in that neighborhood. They had the house built, as they testified. Obviously, they did it in a certain fashion that would, be in character with that neighborhood. I mean, we all seen the house. I mean, it's a beautiful house, right? And I think they're really concerned about the impact on the neighborhood. So, when we talk about all of the different things we're talking about, taking them separately, I don't think any one of us really has an issue, whether it's just a curb cut, or if it's just an addition with a garage, or if it's just the in-law. I think it's the combination of those, right? But then I gotta go back and say, hey, and Mr. Shaw made this point, and Mr. Lionel made this point, we're not here, we can't enforce the things that we approve. And I think, again, my personal opinion would be, if this is really an issue of the city, then I would certainly encourage, folks here and the aldermen to bolster the enforcement part of the city's function, if that's really an issue. But again, I know it's there, but I can't really, in good faith, consider that, because that's not what I can do. Obviously, Mr. Bruno could have came here and said, I just want a driveway to park my camper in on my big trailer. We've seen that kind of application before. Or I put a garage. I think generally, his mother-in-law, and I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but his mother-in-law has a car, still driving. And I think we're gonna see more of this as people age, people are more healthier, they're gonna drive longer. It probably won't be the last application we see with maybe somebody wanna put an extra garage in, but where's that put? I think, again, that garage, I don't really look at that those garage doors as an official entrance. It's not really a doorway that you're using. And whether it's two-car garage, one-car garage, I think that's really up to the applicant, what they wanna do. I think it's their convenience, and if I had the space and I could go for extra garage space, I'd go for it in a minute. I mean, it just makes sense to me. So, all in all, I think I would find very much difficulty in finding anything to deny the application. I know that if we were talking 36 feet in an area zoned with 4,000 or 5,000 square foot lots, we would be kind of really trying to figure that one out, right? But I think, again, I saw the extra curb cuts in the neighborhood. I didn't count who has what and how many curb cuts. But again, the Brunos are presenting exactly what they're going to do. I have no reason to believe, and I don't think anybody brought any testimony that they're going to do anything different. I understand there's a lot of unknown for the future, but I guess I can't make my decision based on that, because I think, in some respects, we could say we'd end up approving everything or denying everything based on what's gonna happen in the future. So, I'm making my decision in my support of the application based on what's presented. I think it fits in the neighborhood. It's a half-acre lot. The house was built in a certain way. This design, I think, will enhance the design of the house. And again, as we're talking about, right, 750 square feet. I don't know what's gonna happen in the future, but, it's not inconceivable that you could have 4 people living in there, but, hey, some weird things happen, right? But what I'm saying is that I guess at this point in time, I am considerate and appreciative of the concerns, but I think that concern would be in any part of the city that we're in. But what we have is an ordinance in front of us, and they have every right to come and ask for this, and I don't see how I can deny that request.
Thank you. Mr. Welch?
Yeah. So kind of listening to the rest of the board talk, and When I look at this and I consider it, I do support it because for me, you focus on the now and not the what ifs in the future. My only question is the definition of an entrance for a dwelling, accessory dwelling. I struggle with saying a garage isn't an entrance because it is an entrance. That's my only concern. So I don't know, and there's no request for a variance for that.
I mean, our staff thought the entrance was really the front door, how you walk into the entrance of the house. Garage doors are, yeah, they could be considered entrances. I mean, you go in and out of them. Same thing with a window. You go in and out of windows as well.
Mr. Shaw?
I mean, two things, well, or maybe a few things. So I think, Mr. Boucher, you did a really nice job of summing things up, and you, one point I was thinking of, and you pretty much said it was, but I was thinking of it a little bit differently. I don't really want to begrudge anybody garages, because I think there's very few people that wouldn't like to have as many garages as they can have. Just, it's one of those things, right? But no, I do think you really did a nice job of summing things up, and I think it really kind of helped convince me that there isn't a reason to deny this. And, you know, I think we also need to keep in mind, special exception is a fairly low bar. The main reason why the concerns were about not meeting the criteria are the curb cut. Obviously, there's a variance, and I think you spoke well to that with the large lots and the multiple curb cuts elsewhere. I think that's an easy, like, it's definitely consistent with the rest of the neighborhood. And then we're down to this, like, a little bit of uncertainty over things like, you know, the appearance of single family. And I guess I'm wondering if, to your point, Mr. Welch, that maybe it really comes down to, at some point, that just has to be adjudicated, you know, in a court case, in terms of somebody saying, yeah, a garage door is or isn't an entrance. But I guess, I think I would defer to staff at this point, but maybe we'll end up finding that ends up being the you know, something that flips a case like this or some other one in the future, and it is decided that met that criteria. But I think, to me, it seems that the spirit and intent of the ordinance in this specific thing would be the definition of an entrance being for a regular entryway door, not a garage door. But I guess that might get resolved at some point. Maybe it'll be one of those that, maybe not for a long time, but.
I think we have a solid 3 or plus majority support. I just wanted to say, would you like to hazard a motion, Mr. Boucher?
I will.
Would you like to do the special exception first?
Sure.
Or shouldn't we do the variance first, because then at least the curb cut is satisfied for the, I always get confused as to which is a
Usually
better
we do the
direction.
special exception first.
Usually the use comes before the dimensional, usually, but
Okay.
I would do the special exception first if it was.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the special exception for Thomas and Melissa Bruno of 29 Marlow Road. It's in the R18 zone, code section, I don't know if this is one that applies to it or not, 190-32, and ordinance 0-17-036. They are requesting a special exception to allow an accessory in-law dwelling unit. It is listed in a table of uses. It will not create undue traffic congestion or unduly impair pedestrian safety. Will not overload public water, drainage, or sewer, or other municipal systems. The special regulations are fulfilled. Mr. Bruno, as the applicant, has testified that he will be in compliance with all the accessory dwelling unit stipulations. 9 points. There's 9 points which we had some discussion over. It will not impair the integrity or be out of character with the neighborhood and be detrimental to the health, morals, or welfare of the residents.
So we have a motion for approval of the special exception. Is there a second to that from Mr.
Second, but I'd like to just request if if you could note that it's contingent upon the approval of the variance that'll allow the curb cuts, because otherwise, that was my concern before, that technically that's not met.
So noted.
So noted,
Second
so the
with that.
motion is amended to include that. Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? Show of hands in favor of the motion for the special exception, and that's unanimous. So now you're gonna go on to the variances.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance for Thomas and Melissa Bruno, 29 Mile Road, R18 zone. They are requesting to exceed the maximum driveway width, 24 feet allowed, 24 feet existing on Marlow Road, an additional 12 feet proposed on Browning Avenue for a total width of 36 feet. They also are requesting to allow a new second curb cut on Browning Avenue. We find that the variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property. The applicant stated the challenges with the topography and making this curb cut that's going to line up with the new addition to be more seamless in the neighborhood and on Browning Avenue, to make that something that's more appealing. The benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue other than an area variance. We find that it is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. It will not adversely affect property values of surrounding parcels. There's no testimony one way or the other. It is not contrary to public interest, and substantial justice would be served.
And that, the motion is seconded by Mr. Shaw. Any discussion on the motion? I guess I just have some discussion, and I'm not gonna be supporting these variances, and I'd just like to say, I have every confidence that the applicant, assuming this is approved, is gonna follow through with a great-looking addition, and I have every confidence in that, and my opposition is, I feel that in totality, yes, if you just look at the driveway and say, well, there's other ones right there that have two driveways, and yes, you could have add-on to the garage or do this or that, but in the totality of this package, I feel this crosses the line of two entrances, but that's just me. I speak my piece, I'm done. Is there any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, a show of hands in favor. So that's 4, and opposed is myself. So for the Brunos, that carries. Your application is approved. Say we wish you good luck on your construction, but remember there's that 30-day window of appeal, so if you have any questions on that, you can call Mr. Falk tomorrow. And with that, I'll close the public meeting on case number 2. Are we good to keep going? We're going to take a 5-minute recess, folks, 5-minute recess, and then we'll be back for case number 3.
Zipping right on.
I didn't realize this was going on. It was so contentious.
I knew it would be, actually. It's funny how that happens.
Thanks.
addictive.
You kind of got me and Jack going.
Oh, yeah. It was mine.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Could we get back into session here? I'd like to open the public hearing on case number 3. The owner is Procyon Properties, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. The applicant is Area Agency of Greater Nashua, doing business as Gateways Community Services. The address is 100 Perimeter Road. It's by the airport in the airport industrial zone. The description is requesting a use variance to allow the use of a existing building, excuse me, to provide social services and counseling of autistic children. Hi, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Morgan Hollis. I'm a lawyer with Gottesman and Hollis in Nashua, and I'm here representing the owner and the applicant. And representatives of both the owner and the applicant are here this evening, should you have any questions about it. The property in question, I passed out a 2-page handout, which is essentially a tax map, an enlargement of the city's tax map, and an enlargement of a portion of the city's zoning map. And the parcel in question is identified on both, highlighted as E1454. And on the other, it's listed as 100, being the address, 100 Perimeter Road. I think that gives you a good location if you didn't get a chance to get out there. It is at the, I would say, towards the end of Perimeter Road, but not at the end. Perimeter Road is the original road heading out to the control tower at the airport. It's before the access to what was formerly Daniel Webster College. And as you proceed out on the road, you see on the right-hand side a number of office buildings, and then you arrive at the airport buildings. And as you continue around the corner, there's the back entry to the private way, what was formerly Daniel Webster College. And this is the first lot on the left. It's the first of 2 buildings which look very similar, with some stone frontage and then a 2-story building, essentially. This is an existing building. It was built a number of years ago. It was originally occupied and used by an engineering firm, Hamilton Engineering, and the principal was David Farr. They were there for a number of years, and then subsequent to that, it was purchased by the current owner, and they had an affiliation with Daniel Webster College and essentially had a relationship, purchased it, and leased it to the college for their use. And the college used it for a number of years until recently, obviously, the college closed and they no longer used it. The owner then put the matter on the property on the market, and it has been a number of months. Actually, we all know how long it's been since the college closed, so it's been going on a year now. And very few, if any, nibbles have been had on that property. And it always raises the question why, which is also the reason why we're here this evening. That's a difficult location for an office building. If you drove down there, you realize it's primarily larger buildings, warehouses, manufacturing, until you get to the very end, and there's an office park, which is different than a single office building. It's adjacent to the Melanson Heath building, but it's also adjacent to the residential neighborhood and adjacent to the college. You can see on the map, and I'll get into that sort of on the 5th point of the argument, but that tees up what that property is. What we're looking for this evening is the applicant is Area Agency of Greater Nashua, doing business as Gateways. Gateways is a nonprofit operation which does a great deal of work with specialized challenged people, and one of the functions they serve has to do with dealing with diagnosed autistic children. And the proposal here this evening and the requested use is to allow this building, both floors, the entire building, to be used for counseling and, if you will, education of autistic children ages 2 to 13. The building has 2 levels. As I said, both levels would be occupied by the same use, so it is a whole building use, not a partial building use. The AI zone has an express purpose under the ordinance, the land use code, to provide space for industrial and manufacturing uses away from neighboring uses with sufficient land area to maintain compatibility with the surrounding uses, and in particular, providing an area for airport-related and compatible uses. That's what this zone is for. Unfortunately, this is the unusual lot, sort of, in the neighborhood. It is the closest to the residents, it is the closest to the college, it is the farthest away from the airstrip, and it is also one of the smallest, if not the smallest lots in that entire airport industrial area. The proposed use itself is a bit unusual, and Carter and I went back and forth on how this gets classified, the type of use it might be, but it is essentially just as identified. In speaking with my client about it, they sent me a description, which I think is just easier for me to read. What is applied behavior analysis? And that's what they do. Behavior analysis focus on the principles that explain how learning takes place. Positive reinforcement is one such principle. When a behavior is followed by some sort of a reward, the behavior is more likely to be repeated. Through decades of research, the field of behavior analysis has developed many techniques for increasing useful behaviors and reducing those that may cause harm or interfere with learning. What little you may know about autistic children, probably, like me, may have gleaned it from either reading about them or seeing them portrayed on TV. They have special needs, special care, and what this center does is educate them, teach them skills, teach them how to coexist with each other and hopefully coexist with others, how to move on in life, as simple as eating different foods. I've been advised that autistic children, for example, really like eating one type of food, not multiple types. So one of the skills they teach them is how to deal with varieties of food, how to interact with other people that may not be consistent with the way autistic children perceive the world. Those are the skills that go on here. It's a bit of a unique use, but it is counseling and it is social services being provided. That differs from an office environment. As you might guess, there's some noise, some activity. If you have to share a bathroom like they do in their current facility, you've got adults in an office center sharing bathrooms with children, those kind of things. It turns out this is the ideal site for this use, which is why I think it's a reasonable use and why it should be allowed. That'll be the last point of the 5 criteria. But that's the property, that's the proposed use. Now, I'd like to highlight, I guess, the 5 points. As I said, first of all, is ages 2 through 13. There'll be 25 to 36 children in this area. They have a 1-to-1 teaching ratio. Every student has a teacher or mentor or counselor. They teach behavior to increase productivity and engagement and socialization in society. The proposed operating hours are 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. There'll be up to 20 employees. That is, they won't have all 36 people there at one time in all likelihood, but they may have, from time to time, a variety of up to 36. The 5 points. Granting will not be contrary to the public interest. The public interest is defined by the character of the neighborhood. That is, you shouldn't be granting a variance which is going to significantly change, materially alter the character of an existing neighborhood. That's the purpose behind zoning, and that's in the public interest to maintain that type of neighborhood. So what do we have in the neighborhood? 2 office buildings, 2 manufacturing facilities, 2 warehouses, airport, a great deal of airport hangars which have offices, warehouses combination. We have Daniel Webster College, and then right in the back, as the zone line changes on Indian Rock Road, we have a number of residences. There will be no change to the exterior. What you see is what you get. It's not close to other buildings as such. If you drove by, you saw there's a great deal of woods surrounding it, which is unusual in an office park area, but there's woods in the rear. It's a small lot. There's not a great deal they can do in the back. There's woods to the side. Across the street is the airport facility. The noise, whatever's created in this building will be internal. There's not going to be a great deal of activity on the outside. There may be some play area, but not a great deal of activity. And it's similar to prior uses that have gone on in this building, whether they're adult or office facilities. It's a similar type that is internally confined with people teaching and doing things. There'll be no threat to the public health, safety, or welfare. As I indicated, that this is all city water and sewer, and there'll be no outdoor activity where children will be running loose in the street or anything. It's a quiet area, and it's a pretty well-contained site. Number two, the proposed use will observe the spirit of the ordinance. The spirit is to provide space for uses compatible and complementary to the airport. One of the concerns that people have about this proposed use is there's some noise and the conflict with the zones that it's permitted in. Well, the airport has noise, and that's why they're concerned about what uses should be there. We think that it's compatible with this zone. The building exists, there's no change. It allows the character of the neighborhood to remain the same, it won't alter the character, and there's no threat to health, safety, or welfare. Substantial justice will be granted. The owner has purchased as part of a deal with the college, leased it, the college left, ITT left. They're now out in a market where there is not a great deal of demand for offices, standalone office buildings, 10,000 square feet. It's a little too small for the bigger office complexes. Can't really divide it up into multiple tenants like down the street. So they're in a quandary. Along comes this perfect use. If you grant it, it'll be substantial justice to the property owner. It'll also be justice to the applicant. There'll be no harm to the public if you were to grant the variance. So the balance swings in favor of granting it. The proposed use will not diminish the value of surrounding properties. There's no change in the building. There's no real exterior activity that would impact values of properties. There's no objection from any neighbor. We contacted Melanson Heath, and they indicated that we could speak on their behalf, that they have no objection. We also contacted the owner of the property. This is a leased building on leased land. You may not be familiar with it, but the airport authority owns all of that land out there and leases these buildings, leases the land for which the building is located. The airport authority, who there's a representative here this evening, so I won't have to speak for them, but they submitted a letter, and they have no objection. We're well aware of, they want us to be conscious that the airport makes noise, and we're okay with that. Finally, the final point is the hardship. Is the property unique? That's the first criteria. Well, we think it is. I think I outlined why we think it's unique. It's also why maybe it's had a little bit of difficulty renting as an office building. It's in that one little point, which is closest to the college, farthest from the airport buildings, and small lot. There's no ability to put a warehouse in there. The trucks can't maneuver up in the upper part, and the front lower part doesn't have bays. So it's really stuck with what it was designed for. It's on leased land. It's next to the airport, but not really a part of it. It's a two-story with two separate entrances, has no loading area, and as I say, it's closest to the residential and the college of any lot in that park. Because of these factors, because of this uniqueness, and because of what that building was constructed to look like, there really is no fair and substantial relationship between enforcing the code, imposing the restriction of airport uses only on this particular property, and the purpose of the ordinance. That is, let's not devalue properties by having uses that are not coincident with the airport. We think this use is, we think it's reasonable, and that's the criteria that this board has to find at the end of the day. Is this use reasonable such that it won't alter the neighborhood character, that it won't affect health, safety, and welfare, that it won't harm property values? Is it reasonable for all those reasons? And we think it is. I think we're lucky we found a match, and I would ask for your approval of the variance on this application. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Attorney Hollis? Yes, I have one question. I agree with like 95% of what you're saying. The one thing I'm stuck on and wanted to explore was there a proposal for an outside play area? because I agree, when I went and looked at the lot, there's not a lot of area, really no area outside. I don't think there's anything for that, but maybe that's okay. I'd rather hear that from you. And the second thing is that the noise factor, it would seem to me that if a use like this goes in, the airport could start getting complaints of noise, and they don't need any more of that. But I just want to hear you speak to that noise thing. Are you saying that that's not going to be an issue, or that's a known issue and it's okay, or?
They're well aware of it, but I think the best people to answer that question would be someone from the area agency who's here this evening. They're aware of that concern, in particular the airport's concern of the noise, and they probably can answer the question about the play area better too.
Sure.
If someone would come up. Crystal Siegel is here, and she is the director.
Hi.
Hi, if you could just give us your name and address.
Sure. My name is Crystal Siegel. I live at 2 Prescott Street in Nashua.
Welcome.
Thank you. So, I'm sorry, was your question?
Is there a proposed outdoor play area to be constructed there, or is it all?
No, nothing to be constructed. It's just the back. Have you been there to the building?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you go up
And
there's
behind.
just a little area where the kids can ride like little tricycles, basically. Nothing major. Maybe a sandbox or something like that.
Okay.
You. And then your noise, was it on our end or their end? I'm sorry.
No, I mean, the airport makes a lot of noise.
Yes.
And I just wanted to hear from you. I didn't want to, if this were to be approved, I'd hate to create a situation that the airport's getting complaints from you about noise. I mean, there's really nothing they're going to do about that. The noise is what it is, as I see it. And I'd like to hear from you that that's not an issue for you and your proposed use.
Well, I think it's a perfect marriage because we also make a lot of noise. And that's why this standalone in this area is really perfect for what we've been looking for. I'm not sure how much you guys are aware of the autism population. We have 100 kids on our wait list right now. And we really need a space that's conducive to teaching these kids who need us. And this building is perfect for that. So I have no concerns about the airport noise at all.
All right, thank you. Are
Thank
there
you.
any other questions for Ms. Crystal? All right,
Thank you.
I think we're all set. Was there anybody else to speak in favor of this proposal? You were speak in favor? Again, if you could give us your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Chris Lynch, 500 Main Dunstable Road. Also the airport manager for the record. I assume that you received the letter that we wrote? Is that correct?
Did not.
No, I don't either.
I think it was in our package. Would you like to read it to us?
I'll just read a part of it.
Yeah, we didn't receive it, it looks like, but,
Mr. Chairman, I'll just submit it.
all right. And then if you'd like to Mr. Lynch, walk us through what's here, we'd appreciate
Okay.
that.
I'll just go down to the third paragraph. Nashua Airport Authority is aware that some autistic individuals have sensitivity to noise, and I know that you just addressed that with the lady that was speaking. We'd like to go on record as stating that the property is located on airport property, and there is a considerable level of noise associated with the typical operation at this airport. With that being said, and I think that's crystal clear to everybody, and she didn't state any opposition to that, and they said they make a lot of noise. We have no problem with the additional noise that could possibly come out of this counseling center, and therefore the Nashua Airport Authority approves of the use proposed by Gateways for the building and hereby supports its application for variance. We wholeheartedly support this program, too.
All right, any questions for Mr. Lynch? They'd probably like to have more butters that are noisy people.
Well, like you
Might
said, we
work
don't
in
want
your
any more
advantage.
noise complaints, because we do get enough as it is, but.
All right.
No, this is perfect. This is a great location for them.
All
Look
right.
forward to having them there.
Thank you.
All set? Thank you.
We're all set. Was there anybody else to speak in favor of the proposed counseling at 100 Perimeter Road? Anybody with questions, concerns, opposition? Questions, concerns, opposition? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Ms. McKay?
Okay, I need to, in the interest of openness and transparency, Gottesman and Hollis were my attorneys in a successful venture. Tim Leach is sitting out there. He's the CFO of Gateways. I'm a former employee of Gateways. My autistic child gets services or receives services from Gateways Community Services. And for me to render an impartial decision would be accurate to say, but for me to say that I would be unbiased, unprejudiced, and not in favor of anything that Gottesman and Hollis and Gateways wanted to do would also, you know, it's accurate. I would be. I'm a former employee. I mean, so I just want that known and stated clearly that I understand the Autism Center. I understand that autistic children certainly are noisy. I've lived with one for 25 years. She's not quiet. But I just want you all to know that if you think it's best that I recuse myself, since Jay is here, that's fine. I mean, I don't want anything to taint a vote. I just want to be honest.
Probably a good idea, I would think.
You know, that's in my humble opinion, but I just wanted you all to know.
I think, ultimately, you have to make that decision. We can't make that for you.
I understand, but my ultimate decision is where I feel I obviously could be biased or unbiased and render that honest opinion. We have Jay here, and it's okay for me to step back, acknowledging that the work that Gateways does and that Gottesman and Hollis do, in my humble opinion, is second to none. So.
So Jay's getting put to work tonight. All right. Jay, how about you first?
Sure. So, excuse me, so just proceed. So Ms. McKay, should she still be taking the notes on this, or is she completely recused from the process?
Mr. Shaw?
I think just based on kind of consistent and regular practice, I think it's best in a recusal that if you are recusing from the case, that you should just step down and have a seat in the audience. Somebody else can take over clerk for the case.
Okay.
I think it's just a formality, but I think just for consistency.
Okay.
I'll take the paperwork.
Do you remember how to do this, JP?
No. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Welch?
I support the application. I don't think it's gonna have any adverse interest to the public, so it's.
Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, I think it does sound like it's a really good fit, and I think it's a good situation, and I definitely support it.
Mr. Lionel?
All the questions I had were answered by testimony. I support this.
As for me, the only concerns I have are completely answered. I wasn't sure how it was going to work with a small area outside and noise, but, you know, Ms. Crystal has answered that. Seems like a good marriage, so it's good for me. I'm in support of it. Mr. Boucher?
Well, I support the application, and I think that, again, not because we've done this before, but I think we've seen this airport industrial zone in transition, especially on the Amherst Street side, right? So I think that, you know, it's something that's happening. I think we've considered cases like this before, but this one here, I think, really makes sense for this particular side of the airport. So I'll support the application.
Maybe I'll hazard a motion. I'll make a motion on behalf of the owner, Procyon Properties LLC. Again, the applicant is Area Agency of Greater Nashua, doing business as Gateways Community Services, The request is a use variance at 100 Perimeter Road to allow the property and existing building to provide social services and counseling of autistic children. The board finds a variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property, which outlined by attorney this evening and in our application, is the building's unique size and structure, making it unusable to find tenants in this economy. Yet what's being proposed with the counseling of autistic children, it's an ideal building for that. So even though it's within the airport industrial zone, the board finds it's within the spirit and intent of the ordinance to allow the counseling of autistic children. The board believes it will not have any impact on the property values of surrounding properties. I think the board finds it's not contrary to public interest, and substantial justice is served to the landowner and the lease owner to allow this, and actually mostly to Gateways Community Services to allow the counseling of autistic children. So I make a motion to approve as provided in the plan tonight. Seconded by Mr. Lionel. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, a show of hands in favor. So that's unanimous. So that's been approved. We wish you good luck with your proposal, and just remember there's that 30-day window of appeal. And with that, I'll close the public. You're welcome. I'll close the public meeting on case number 3. Ms. McKay will return to her
Oops. Forgot the count.
All right, I'd like to open the public hearing on case number 4. The owner is Duke and Tam Nguyen at 191 East Dunstable Road. The request is a variance to encroach 4 feet into the 6-foot required side yard setback to construct a 12-foot by 16-foot shed in the R9 zone. Hi, good evening. Could you give us your name and address?
Zoning Board. My name is Doug Nguyen. I'm owner of 191 East Dunstable Road. And I request for the shed like move closer to the property like 2 feet. What happened is if like 6 feet, like my backyard like narrow, so it's kind of like almost in the middle. So I want to move like closer to the property line, and my kid can play in the backyard.
All right. Is that it for your testimony? And that's fine if it is.
Yep.
I guess just a couple of points here. Let me get your application handy. A few things we look for are uniqueness of the property that you're seeking, and I think what you are speaking to is you have this really unusually long and narrow lot.
Right.
And what you were saying was if you adhere to the 6-foot side yard setback, it ends up putting a shed right in the middle of what would otherwise
Close,
be
yeah.
your backyard. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure we had that on the record about the unique situation of your property. Were there any other questions for Mr. Nguyen? I think we're all set. I think we're all set. You could have a seat. Is there anybody else to speak in favor of the application? Is there anybody with questions or concerns? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Thoughts? Maybe Mr. Boucher?
Sure. I support the application, and obviously the most striking thing about this is this unique lot. It's almost like a needle, right? And also, what we see here is that, there are several things going on too. This reaches out to Salmon Brook, the tip of it. Halfway down the property, you have a conservation easement, you have a sewer line easement. So, the usable space, is not the total length of the property, obviously, topographically and what's going on there. And again, very narrow lot. The shed location, kind of where, I know it's not dimensioned out, but, in respect to what else is going on there, on the side that he's proposing it to go on, is backyards, true backyards of other properties adjacent to it. So again, I don't think you're gonna really see this from the street. I don't think, obviously, there's nobody here to speak against that. So again, the unique shape of the property makes it really easy for me to approve this application as it stands. There's not really much other choice in this home here.
Thank you. Maybe I'll throw out a few additional thoughts. We've certainly seen a lot of these requests for sheds to encroach within the 6 feet. I think his proposal of 4 feet into the 6 feet, I mean, it still leaves an area there that he can get behind it and maintain it. You can't see this from the street. I go by it all the time. I was a little concerned because there's a flag lot on the right side. You can't really see what's going on there, but I thought it might be an imposition on that, and so I was gonna be open to any testimony we heard, but we don't have any testimony, so it's good to me, and I'm in support of it. Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, I mean, and I was actually also somewhat concerned about number 189 and the impact that this might or might not have. But considering the position of their house and the position of the shed being really pretty much off their back corner of their lot, and yet it doesn't go far enough back that it's really now back alongside 187, it seems like it's actually a relatively kind of good balance of things. It's set back enough from Mr. Nguyen's, back of his house, yet it doesn't look like it really has significant impact on either of those direct abutters. And clearly, this is a very uniquely shaped lot, so not a lot that he can do with this shed otherwise. So I think it's quite reasonable, and I think I'm fine with supporting it.
Mr. Welch?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable. I don't have any issues with it.
Mr. Lionel?
Same. It looks fine to me. The lot is what I call spaghetti farm. And I just don't see any real alternative, and I don't see any harm in this placement.
Ms. McKay?
I concur with everything that's been said. I'm in favor. There's nothing else and nowhere else for them to go.
Yeah, if you look at the left and right side yard setback on that structure, I'd say it's pretty much maxed out. The house is like shaped to run right along the setback. Somebody like to make a motion? Mr. Lionel?
Sure. I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance requested by Duck and Tam Nguyen. Address is 191 East Dunstable Road in the R9 zone. They're requesting a variance to encroach 4 feet into the 6-foot required right yard setback to construct a 12 by 16-foot shed. The variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property. Given the unusual shape of the property, there is no other place that the shed can reasonably go without seriously impacting the use of the property as a whole. This is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance, and we believe that it will not adversely affect the property values of surrounding parcels. We've had no testimony regarding that. It's not visible from the street, not contrary to the public interest, and substantial justice to the applicant would be served.
Motion on the table that's seconded by Mr. Shaw. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, a show of hands in favor of the motion. So that's unanimous. So, Mr. Nguyen, your application is approved. We wish you good luck with your shed. Remember, there is that 30-day window of appeal. If you have any questions, you could ask Mr. Falk tomorrow.
You have 2 years, actually. 2 years. You have to get a building permit within 2 years, so you have plenty of time.
All right, have a good night. With that, I'll close the public hearing on case number 4. I'm sorry, the public meeting, and open the public hearing on case number 5. The address is 34 Franklin Street.
I don't think we have.
Oh, we didn't have
We
it.
have two number threes.
We have 2 number 3s.
So the 34 Franklin Street, just to read it into the record correctly, the request, there's 2 variances. Number 1, to allow a 530 square foot roof sign where 0 square feet is allowed. And number 2, to allow 5 vertical banners totaling 225 square feet where 0 square feet is allowed. This is in the GIMU zone in Ward 3. Hi, good evening. Would you like to give us your name and address and walk us through your application?
Good evening. I'm Scott Alberton from First Sign, and my address is 107 Hollis Street in Manchester.
And what, I'm sorry, what was your name?
Scott Alberton.
Scott, is that A-U-B-O-R-T-O-N?
B-E-R-T-I-N.
B-E-R, okay. Welcome, Mr. Arberton.
Thank you.
What say you?
Okay. I think what I'd like to do is kind of address the overall project in just kind of an opening statement, because our arguments and our reasons for wanting the signage are the same for both the rooftop sign and also the individual banners that go on the building. So I think it makes good sense to just kind of cover what we really want to do there. And what we feel is that the revitalization of this property is a good example of how many city buildings are being repurposed once they outlive their livelihood. And what we have in this situation is a situation where we have an extremely large building, fairly nondescript. It doesn't look like a residence. And our real purpose here in doing the signage is to make people aware that there are loft apartments available there in the walking circumference of downtown, and that this building is being used as residences. So what we try to do is design something that was kind of period, fit well with the building. We're subject to the National Historic Review for tax credits that the project gets, and we've gone through that approval process and revised our designs so that they fit in with their vision of what it should look like also. The rooftop sign specifically is our really only visibility from anywhere else in the city because of the position of the building being back from Main Street the way it is, and it's right up against the street everywhere. So the only real line of visibility we have for the building is from across the river and on Main Street. So what we're hoping to do is put a sign up there that's appropriately sized and designed for the building to get the exposure that we want to get there and to build excitement about the revitalization of the building and creating a little bit of a neighborhood feel there. The vertical banners are more obviously for pedestrian traffic and ground level vehicular traffic. And what we've done is positioned them kind of around the building on the Franklin Street side and the Water Street side so that it defines the beginnings and the ends of the property, if you will, or the building. What they've done so far is a lot of resurfacing, all the resurfacing with the landscaping and redoing the parking lot and the drainage and everything. Redone the entire facade of the building with all the windows. We're even going to redo the flag on the top of the building, all in an effort to really make it a beautiful destination, something that people recognize and they want to live there, basically. So going through the points quickly here, obviously, let's see, I want to make sure I get the right one here, so I'm not reading from the wrong one. So granting the requested variance will not be in contrary to the public interest, as the proposed sign is designed and sized to be appropriate for the building size and targeted line of visibility. The style and design is to go with the building and really create a historic look with it, whereas we haven't changed the outside of the building. So we don't feel it's in the contrary to the public interest to put this signage on this building. The proposed use will observe the spirits in the ordinance. Obviously, the variance process is in place so that if the ordinance doesn't work well with the property, we have this opportunity to make sure it does. In this case, it kind of just goes back to a size and visibility thing. We've got a huge building there and not a lot of good visibility, so we want to optimize that and create awareness. Substantial justice would be done to the property owner by granting the variance. The branding of the project area is really important to the feeling of community and to the establishment of the area as a neighborhood within the city. The proposed use will not diminish the value of the surrounding properties. On the contrary, it would be expected that the redevelopment of this area is to the benefit of the city of Nashua and the surrounding properties, and will increase the value of the properties in the area by making it a viable, energized destination. Fifth, and I'm not sure not last, the lack of visibility, let's see, I'm sorry. Special conditions exist such that literal enforcement of the ordinance results in unnecessary hardship. Once again, we go back to the situation of the location of the building and the size of the building. Lack of visibility would serve to undervalue the positive effect of the project on the community. It doesn't look like a residence. We're trying to do everything that we can to make sure that in everybody's perception of what a residence should look like, they still know that this is loft-style apartments and it is urban living, and that would be the purpose behind that.
All right, thank you. We want to kick off any questions for Mr. Arberton, Mr. Lionel?
It's not clear to me which side of the building this roof sign was intended for. Is it facing the river?
It is facing the river, correct. So when you go around that curved road towards Chestnut Street, you get visibility from there, and you get visibility from Main Street also. And it would be on the east end of the building, so that it's closest to that for visibility purposes.
Thank you.
I appreciate that question because I was wondering that also. I guess a couple thoughts I have is on the banner signs, you know, I see those around town. You
Sure.
know, I don't have an issue with those. The roof sign, well, now I understand where it is. It's hard for me to envision how big it is, but it just seems very large, and I don't know, I'm just struggling with the size of that. And I'm wondering if, like, one test I use is what if other similar buildings of which kind of go up and down the river asked for this, it would be a massive amount of signage, and so I'm struggling with that roof sign, I guess, but Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, if I could jump in, because I was actually kind of really surprised by the 530 square feet, but if you look at that drawing, and that's where basically what has happened, and I think this is unfortunately sometimes the way things work, the calculation is based on the 13-foot, 3-inch height of that round ball, and then the 40-foot extent of the sign, including even that last 4-foot little piece that sticks out. So,
They've changed the design. It's going to look
Yeah,
like this.
I was gonna
A little
interject it.
smaller now.
okay.
I think I sent you all an email
Yeah.
that
that
showed the
one?
revision.
So now it's down to only a 6-foot-tall letter, and I think where we get the square footage too is this amount of space between the letters too. because
Right,
it's spread
this
out.
goes,
You should got an email.
Yes.
I think, yeah, and I think
did
I
get-
had.
Yeah, we did get an email.
There was an email that showed, they did shorten it.
Yeah, I mean, basically, in that drawing that I was looking here, only about half, or actually, my quick rough calculation, about 260 square feet out of 530 was even really kind of really true sign. I think what we have even here or
That's-
there,
That's.
we had a similar kind of discussion, I think, on the last
Skechers.
meeting where the channel letters, are still, that whole space is being defined as sign area, yet the actual letters are much less of that total area. But I should let the applicant respond to your question. Sorry, I was going by the other sign as it was, so.
Have you seen that one, Jack?
Well, he was just demonstrating it, the other side. That's the new
Yeah,
one?
that's the one I
Yeah.
emailed.
Okay,
It's a scaled-back version,
I didn't take that
what we
with me.
proposed.
And is
What's
that
that
the
calculate out
530
as?
square feet?
No, it's less.
I don't believe so. I don't think that got changed in the application.
Yeah, I think we got it afterwards. It was a lesser number, so we
Right.
could go ahead with it.
Correct.
So
So it's a lot less
it's
square
not,
footage.
it's not a
actually.
larger number than what was advertised. It was actually much smaller. I don't remember the square footage of the new one.
What's the length and width of it?
It's 6 feet tall and 40 feet long, so that's easy.
240.
240 square feet. And where 200 is allowed.
No, none is allowed.
None is allowed, yeah.
I'm sorry,
Or
yeah,
roof sign,
correct.
yeah,
If
that's
it
what
was
it is.
wall-mounted, 200 square feet would be allowed.
Mr. Boucher has a question.
So describe the mounting of the channel letters. Is that gonna be on a bottom, like bottom rail, or, you know, because it looks like part of it doesn't have a back of the building, right, to it?
Actually, there's a full triangular structure behind it.
Okay. So in essence, right, from what I get and from what I understand is that basically, except for the letters, you'll be able to see through that.
Exactly.
Okay. I think it's the same, same discussion we had, which I brought up, was it's not, there's no back, it's not a full box sign, so it's just the letters, right, sitting there?
Yeah.
It was the Franklin Street case, actually.
Well, actually, we had a couple. We had Bonhoeffers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
what
we
it
also
was.
had even Skechers the last
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah.
Sketches was one
That's
of
it,
them.
yeah.
They had a similar, that was a wall sign, but it was a similar issue.
Mr.
White
Lionel, did
space.
you have a question?
Why, well, first of all, lofts 34 doesn't, to me, say apartments. Although I'm sort of familiar with what was going on in this building, I didn't understand what the reference was. So, well, that's not our purview, but given that there is this, I guess this is a wall that hides air conditioning and other equipment, could the sign be placed on that wall and therefore that would fall under different regulations?
I'm probably not the best person to answer that, but Chris Lewis is here from Brady Sullivan Properties, and he's the architect on the project, so he'd be more prepared to answer that, I'm sure. I think it could potentially be put there. I think that the idea was to give it its own space, have it kind of hovering above the top edge of the building, and I think the name Lofts 34 implies kind of an upscale, almost a throwback, if you will, to, I'm not even sure how to explain it, but I think it's...
I have a problem with a sign of this size visible from as far away as it's going to be. It's going to really dramatically change the, I quite call it skyline, but the view from a scenic part of Nashua, and we were earlier talking about, there's the Riverwalk and all of that. And I don't think I would like to, look across and see this huge illuminated sign standing up on top of the building there. The banners I don't have a problem with, but this rooftop sign I do.
Just to keep things moving here are there questions at this point? I guess one thing, I'd mentioned I was having some issue with the roof sign. There's walking around the building, with this, I finished my complete Bonhoeffer's coffee because I was trying to line this sign up with this to the front, the side, and I'm over on the river, and I gave up. Because I was like, well, I don't know where that is. And so I guess another thought I have is I wish I could, it's like it's hard for me to comment because now I know where it is, and I didn't look at it from that angle. I thought it was more on Franklin Street, and that's, so I guess I hear what you're saying about the skyline. I didn't look at it from that angle, and that's where I'm at right now, but just my thoughts.
I think being on the other side wouldn't really be appropriate for the sign because it faces all the residential area. And I think the idea was to have it face the downtown area where there's commerce and is, the central business district.
Mr. Falk?
Just a note, the 34 of the Lofts 34 is the address. It's 34 Franklin.
I figured
Street,
that.
so
Yeah.
That's just,
All right, I guess, did the architect want to speak in favor of this or address any concerns we might have? Is fair game. If not, that's fine too. Okay. Mr. Shaw?
I think it would be nice just to follow up on the question about placement of the sign regarding that kind of, again, as Mr. Lionel was talking about with
If you could just give us your name and address for the
partial
record.
wall or whatever.
You could lift that up for you. Yep, there you go.
Thank you. Chris Lewis, 4 Wheat Lane, Hollis, New Hampshire. This elevation, I mean, when we revitalize the building, you know, the first thing we do is kind of figure out how people get to the site, right? And how they circulate through the building. In this particular case, you know, the front of the building's always been kind of Franklin Street, but we're making the front of the building the river's edge. Mostly because, I mean, the views to the river, and that's where a majority of the parking is now, on the other side of the railroad tracks on Front Street. So that really becomes the main entrance and the focal point of the building. I think to address your question regarding that signage, in this elevation, because it's two-dimensional, you don't see that this piece that looks tall is back far enough, so you kind of don't see it from Front Street, and you'll see it from further back. So that is not a spot really where we could put the sign that you could perhaps see it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So, and I also just wanted to add, I mean, we're doing this, we do several of these kinds of projects in different cities, and the signage, you know, becomes kind of an identity, you know, to the building, to the use and so on. And, you know, it's not unlike when you drive through Manchester and you see the old mill buildings with the big, you know, SNHU or other signage on top of it. I think it creates another layer of, you know, visual dynamics for the city, you know. So I think as a visual aspect of a building, I think it's a positive.
Mr. Boucher?
So just going back to the placement of the sign, and I was looking at it, and I'm just wondering, you know, exactly why did you pick that spot on the building? Is it, again, because it's the best view for everybody? Was it because it's kind of looks like the front entrance area and that type of idea? I'm just trying to get your.
Yeah, I think it certainly contributes as identifying the front of the building. We're also putting you know, when you were out there, you didn't see, other than that's the construction entrance currently as well. But there'll be a ramp and a platform and an awning and so on to help, you know, identify that as architecturally as an entrance. And so the sign reinforces that, but we also felt like the sign would speak to the downtown, and that's really what we feel that the building should do. You know, and the view of the building from the downtown, you see it, you know, in slivers and sections or pieces, and the sign kind of helps identify it from the downtown area.
Did you say the entrance was gonna be, in like the awning and stuff, was that gonna be on the Front Street side?
Yes, yep.
Okay.
So when you're in the back, you're back to the river, right? You're looking
Yeah.
at the back of the building. You're gonna see the sign. If you look right below it, that's not on Franklin Street. That's on the other side of the building. That's on the
Front
river
Street.
side of the building.
So is the sign facing like east towards Peddler's Daughter, or is it facing?
It's facing the river.
Facing like Clock Tower.
Facing
Towards
Clock
Clock
Tower.
Tower.
Yeah, it's facing the river, right?
Yeah, the river.
The river, yeah, the
parallel
river,
with the
Clock
river.
Tower
Yeah.
area, just across.
So, you know, when you come around the Clock Tower and you come down Water Street, you'll see it there. When you're downtown at Blue Agave.
Once you come down the
or
ramp,
those-
if you look over
on
to the left,
sidewalk,
right, you'll see it, right?
I see, yeah, so I understand it's on the river side.
Yes.
Is it on the east side or the west side of the building?
The Main Street
South
side.
side.
Or the east.
Is it more the east side towards?
Well, the east end, yeah.
Right about it here, that
Okay.
area.
So you're looking at, in the image, you're looking at the south facade on the east,
Okay,
on the easterly end of the building.
yeah, so that one picture with the sign on top is the south side of
South
the building.
elevation, yes. Yeah.
That's gonna be where the ideal places are, because you got sun on that all day,
Yeah.
and the look, and the river.
And another reason that we made the decision to put it up there is because, as you can see, the building is so much window. there's really no surface area to put signage on down there. It was one of the considerations when we looked at it initially, put it down on the facade, but there really is no room to do it.
All right, any other,
Had you considered doing it vertically along this section of wall here?
You know, I looked at that, Mr. Lano, but it was difficult to read. I couldn't get it to a position where it read well and created a nice design. And I think that Historic might have had an issue with that too. It probably came up in a discussion with them. And they didn't want anything put on the building that would change the character of the facade of the building.
And yet they were okay with this rooftop sign.
Yeah, and we've done it on a couple of projects now. They've actually in support of it. They like the look of it. It's actually something that's been done for so many years. Pandora sign in Manchester is a
State
really good
district.
example that we modeled
Not
that.
our HTC, they're not in our HTC. They abut it, but they're not in our HTC, or historic district.
Mr. Falk was just saying that they're not in the Nashua Historic District Commission, that was the state that they, I thought this was, but they, you say they abut it, but they're not
They
in it.
abut our historic district, but they're not in it.
That was the first question I asked.
Otherwise, they would have been to the historic district already, but,
They would have had to have been.
yeah.
I think we're all silenced. Silenced in something, so.
Well, I hope you'll consider it, because I do feel like it's just well proportioned for the building. It sounds like a lot of square footage, but I think it's appropriate for the building, and it's exciting for Nashua that this property is being revitalized like this. And I know they bought up adjacent properties too to make sure that there's good traffic flow and good parking, and they've gone to great extent to landscape it and make it look amazing. I know this is something they're very, very interested in doing.
200 units
Yeah.
going in the building.
All right, I guess we'll close the
Thank you.
public hearing. I can have a seat. We'll open the public meeting. Thoughts? Who would like to jump in first? Mr. Welch, go
Yeah,
for it.
I'll chime in. So I have no issues with the vertical banners. I struggle with the sign and changing the landscape of downtown. Because when you're coming down Main Street, or if you're standing at Riverside Barbecue, like in the park between Riverside Barbecue and Darrell Music Hall, it's gonna completely change the landscape of downtown. And from a marketing perspective, I don't think it's really up to us to debate their marketing tactics for the building. But I struggle to see why a permanent illuminated sign is really needed.
Thank you. Looking left or right, Mr. Lionel?
I've already said my piece, and it actually matches what Mr. Welch just said.
Mr. Shaw?
I'm gonna kind of hold.
All right, Mr. Boucher?
The banner signs, which I thought would be more discussion on that, I'm okay with that, and actually, I've seen this type of work have been done by other companies at UMass and Lowell, where they revitalized some old mill buildings, and they've got some banner signs there, and they've got channel letters on the building, that type of thing. So I'm kind of familiar with that. I've worked with that before, with a company that did that before, but, so I understand that process. So when I looked at this, again, we're trying to understand scale, right? So we're looking at a drawing, we're looking at up close, right? But as I drove down Main Street, did the Water Street thing, I'm looking over, trying to envision what that is. Now, I understand that these are channel letters, and what, I just wanted to make sure from the applicant that, it's really some space that you're gonna be able to see through there. So, to me, it's not this monstrosity up there. And originally with the big circles where I kind of had concern, but once I saw the revision, the email that went out, I felt a lot better about it. So, we got this drawing here, and I think what I have to, I reminded myself was, is this building is not just that one block, it's this whole building, all right? So the applicant chooses to put this signage on this end of the building because it's kind of where they would like it, and this is where the entrance is. But, what's being marked, right, is the whole building, right? The whole length, right? So, I look at the sheer size of that building, and then I look at, what they're asking for. And I get the whole, I understand, changing the landscape, and yes, it will. I'm not convinced that there's anything that would be detrimental to that, I guess. Again, they're looking to identify the building, to brand the building. We've seen, again, not comparing, but I'm just saying, I'm just thinking out loud, that area, we've seen some stuff with other mill buildings, like where people could, purposely see things off the Broad Street Parkway and, that type of a thing, right? It's not justification for this. I think it does kind of, for me, this idea does kind of start fitting into this revitalization and what they're, what we're doing here. Again, I don't, it's just my opinion, right? I don't see this as some overpowering type of structure or sign. I don't think it's, would be out of the ordinary if it was allowed, if we were looking at that. I mean, look at the sheer size of the building, right? So, so I guess what I'm saying is that looking at it from the different perspectives where we've heard and seen other cases where it's kind of like driving down Main Street one way, kind of trying to identify these properties, especially with the other apartments that went up, right? There was a lot of discussion about seeing being able to see that and people being able to identify that, right, from Main Street. And there were good arguments for that, for that case. And I think there is an argument here that can be made that this will identify the building. And I guess I'm a little lost for words. I'm trying to explain something else, but I'm a little lost right now. But again, I guess maybe I'm just able to envision being able to be on Water Street or be on Main Street. And this, they're 6 feet tall now, right? So if I was standing on the top of that building, right, I mean, like, would it look like I'm this giant? I don't think so. Again, I could be wrong, but right now the way I'm feeling is that type of sign it is and where it is and where it's being viewed from. We're not talking about people who are in the back parking lot looking up and saying, well, really what we're talking about is, this is gonna be seen really from further away, right? I'm not saying people are not gonna see it, but what they're trying to attract the view from is not from the back parking lot, right? It's from further away, so I'll leave it at that.
Ms. McKay?
Okay. The banner signs, I don't have a problem with. The building's huge and, size and scale, I get it. However, I struggle with that rooftop sign. I think to myself, there's already those huge billboards right there, so when you come down Library Hill and you see them, is this gonna rise above it? And take a bunch of that space and the skyline, the skyscape, that's what I think about. And Mr. Boucher, with size and scale, I understand what you were trying to say and how it could be minimized, but it's, in my head, huge. And it's just gonna draw the eye immediately, which, from a marketing perspective, is exactly what you want. But from, I don't know, the aesthetic perspective, is that exactly what I want? I don't know.
Thank you. For me, as I mentioned, I think the banner signs are a tasteful way to get the job done, and they match, the banner signs you see around the downtown on the light posts and stuff. For the roof sign, I'm thinking we had approved a sign, in a way, I think it's similar to this. It was on, I don't know the name of the building, it's behind the Streeter Theater. There's a brick building there, and I think it says K-Base or something on it. It's on Temple Street.
Indian Plaza, right?
What's it called?
Indian Plaza? Is that
Indian
what-
Plaza.
That building,
The two signs on the top?
yeah.
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 Building, there's
Yeah.
a Triangle Credit Union
Yeah.
sign and K-Base.
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 And so I was unsure of that when I approved it, but I think it came out pretty good. It's not that big a sign, but there's a large building that it's on, so it's still very prominent. And we recently approved over by the Broad Street Parkway, it's a large brick building, and there was, I forget the name that's on that one.
It's like Nashua Technology Park.
That one, and also
Yeah,
the
Just
Milliard
Links is
And the other-
Technology
too.
Park, there's,
Yeah, Milliard Technology Park.
they have some signs way at the top too.
And I wish, I wish I had the opportunity to compare this proposal to that, but I didn't know where it was. But my sense is that even at the 6 feet, this is much larger than those. And, I hear it's a large building, but I don't necessarily think that translates to a large sign. If you've got something that's predominant in its own way, that gets the job done. So I guess I'm uncomfortable with it. I feel like I'd like to give it a look, knowing where it is and sizing up the 6 feet, because the picture that's here is the 13-foot, and that certainly looks to me very overkill for what's necessary. It's gonna, people who are driving down Water Street or Main Street, how many out-of-towners are gonna be looking for apartments and go, there's my home? It's gonna be, to me, it's more of a identification, for guests coming in. So I guess I was looking for, I'm not convinced that the 240 square foot is necessary. That's where I'm at. I'm fine with the banner signs. Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, I guess, I think and I'm with everybody else, the banner signs, no issue whatsoever. I think I actually like the design, I like the way I think this would actually look very nice. And I don't think even scale-wise, it would be problematic, especially considering the scale of this building. But I must say, when Mr. Lionel said kind of about the kind of cityscape and that part of things, that did really strike me. And, if we go back to the code, we have the table here, but, it's not a permitted use at all. It's not like we've been talking about going from 50 foot or 100 foot up to 250 or any of those kind of things. It's not allowed. And so there is a little bit of thinking about, okay, back to what's the intent, the spirit and intent of the ordinance, and we kind of have something in front of us that does say there is a desire not to have rooftop signs. We can have, I think the scale of this sign, if it is up against the facade of the building, whether it's shifted down and that qualifies as wall sign or whatever, I think might be very different. But there is kind of this, then, is the intent to allow for and have something where there could be a lot of different rooftop signs that are happening, and there's a different kind of feel to downtown Nashua that wasn't intended or expected because of ordinances that we have. So as much as one part of me would really like to support it, and I think it's a very nice design, and I was fine even with the original, but I think the latest version is probably even less imposing and whatnot, and I'm not concerned about scale, but I am concerned now thinking about the view from kind of the other side of downtown, and there is I'm sure, the applicant wants to make a statement, and I get that, and I appreciate that. I just don't know that we need that kind of made into kind of the view from a good part of downtown.
Well, I have a, Mr. Boucher.
And I just want to say that I acknowledge that, and I understand what you're saying. I think what I was trying to say earlier, and be it relevant or not, these were rundown mill buildings, okay? So I'm like, what would I rather be looking at? Rundown mill buildings, or a building that's been completely rehabbed with this sign, and yes, it's different than what was there before, but again, I go back to that, right? So whether it's relevant for anybody else, for me, I kind of was thinking about that when I was there, because I was in those buildings when they were all run down, and they were bad, right? When I worked for the utility, and I'm like, we were in there all the time, and it was just like so bad, and what they've done back there is so much better. And I say to myself, if I worked in the area or lived in the area, that's what I want to be looking at, not what it was. So again, just my opinion and my observation. Sorry.
Ms. McKay?
I agree with Mr. Boucher. Now, Brady Sullivan does some really nice work. I saw what they did to the mill buildings in Manchester. So that's to your point. But to Mr. Shaw's point, none are allowed. That's in the ordinance. Are we setting a precedent or opening a door or going down a slippery slope? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Can we, actually, do we have the power to say yes, where now it's not allowed? We can do that? I don't know. That's why I'm asking these questions. I honestly don't know.
No, we could approve it as is. We could, a thought I have is we're all comfortable with the banner signs. Perhaps we could make a motion to approve the banner signs.
There's two separate variance applications.
Two separate variances. We have the ability, for example, especially if some of us who are uncomfortable with the size, we could table the rooftop sign and give the applicant a chance to consider if maybe a smaller one would work for them. If there were a table, it would give me the chance to consider more Mr. Boucher's thoughts standing there looking at it from that side, and come back in 2 weeks and see where we're at. Mr. Boucher?
I'm not suggesting the applicant do this at all. What will happen, but I know that in similar issues where we've had really some questions that some other members have, I think that I'm not saying that this applicant can do it or would do it, but some sign manufacturers, vendors have taken color photographs and superimposed as best as they could, kind of the best to scale, not exact, kind of what the view would be. And I know that that's probably helped some people in some cases. I don't know if that would, again, help anybody. It's not that I'm suggesting they do that. I'm just saying that sometimes I know that some of us are more visual, to understand what's going on. So that's just something I wanted to throw out there as something that's been done in the past, but not that I'm asking for it.
Well, you know how the little man standing against a signpost, since you were talking about if you were standing up there, they could superimpose you against the 6-foot sign.
Color photograph before you leave tonight.
I agree with that, and again, you don't want to ask people to do that, but is the sign going to be lighted? Is it going to be, what color is it going to be? What are some of those
Well, it is
It
going to
said
be lighted.
internally illuminated. Right?
illuminated, so I can't, and I'm one of those visual learners, I need to see it, and I cannot.
Consider that at night, pretty much all you'd see is the sign and some illuminated windows. You wouldn't see the building, but the sign would be floating in midair.
So you'd see this big, huge thing just floating there.
Yeah, that was sort of what it would look like.
That's attractive.
Well, maybe, since we're all comfortable with the banner sign, maybe I'll hazard a motion for that. I'll make a motion on behalf of Lofts 34 and First Sign and Corporate Image. There's a request to allow 5 vertical banners totaling 225 square feet where 0 square feet is allowed. I believe this board finds a variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, which is a rehab of an old mill building, and rebranding it as apartments. I think the board finds it's within the spirit and intent of the ordinance that the banner signs matches existing banner signs that are used in the downtown area. I think the board finds that these banner signs are in concert with the rehab of the property and will not at all adversely affect the property values of surrounding parcels. I think the board finds that banner signs are not contrary to public interest and substantial justice is served. So I make a motion to approve the banners, the 5 banner signs totaling 225 square feet where 0 is allowed. Is there a second to the motion? Mr. Shaw, any discussion on the motion? Show of hands in favor. So that's unanimous on the banner signs. So we have that out of the way. I'm more than willing to make a motion to table the rooftop sign. Would you like to go, Mr. Shaw?
No, I think just from, listening to your sentiment about, you didn't get to see it from the view that you would have liked to have seen it, I think there's a chance also the applicant can at least consider whether or not, providing any new visual aids for us or reconsidering anything. And I think I'm fine with tabling it for 2 weeks and see if that's helpful for our ability to either get a better kind of sense and scale and scope, and maybe the applicant chooses to do something further.
Mr. Boucher?
So, seeing how the end of the year is gonna end up, we probably should maybe reopen the hearing just to see when the applicant might wanna come back to us.
Sure, I'll make a motion to reopen the public hearing for that, to discuss our thoughts with the applicant. Is seconded by Mr. Shaw. Show of hands in favor. So that's unanimous. So you've been following along.
Yes.
Got approval for the banner signs.
Thank you all.
We're talking about tabling the rooftop sign.
And I really appreciate that. I was hoping you'd do that and give me the opportunity to come back with some more visuals.
When would you like to come back? 2 or 4 weeks? We
2
have
weeks. 2 weeks would be
2 weeks. So just to clarify,
November 28th.
November 28th.
So if we can get something in by the 21st,
Absolutely.
we can
Get it
kinda
out to
send
us.
out in the package, but if it's after that, we can email it to the board members as well.
Just one of the reasons why you didn't get photographs of this is because the photographs that I had of the building were before any of the windows were put in, and it looked so horrible that to put the sign up on top just wasn't doing it any good. But I'd be happy to get photographs from some different angles and superimpose it on there. And we are able to do it fairly accurately as far as scaling it, so that you can get a good visual of what it would look like from different scopes of view there. So I really appreciate that opportunity.
All right. Any questions? No? We'll close the public hearing and reopen the public meeting. So I'll make a motion to table the variance which asked for a 530 square foot roof sign. I make a motion to table that to the November 28th meeting, seconded by Mr. Shaw. And with the goal of that, we will basically be reopening the public hearing because we'll be taking testimony from anyone. So a show of hands in favor of that table, so that's unanimous. So with that, I'll close the public meeting on case number 5. Thank you. All right. And we have some minutes.
Can you let me finish this before you
Okay,
jump
miss-
to that?
Sure.
They are from October 24th.
Have a good night.
Good night. And that was to the meeting on
November 28th,
28th, okay.
and that was for the roof sign.
Yeah, that's what I had. I just wanted to make sure I got it. Okay, thank you, I'm sorry.
So we have the minutes from October 24th. I had taken a look through those. I didn't have any edits, Mr. Shaw.
I had one thing on page 9, towards the bottom after amended motion, and the next paragraph says, Mr. Shaw asked if the public hearing be reopened as well, and then it goes on, Mr. Courier said that the minutes of prior meetings be incorporated in the record as well. I think what it doesn't say is some acknowledgement then, because I was basically asking the question, but it wasn't, I think there was acknowledgement, yes, that we would reopen the public hearing. So I think it just needs to state that, I believe that that was either acknowledged by you, Mr. Courier, or, but I know I kind of asked it as a question, and I know it was agreed or acknowledged, it just doesn't say that, so.
I concur, is that my recollection is the intent was to open a public hearing. When I look at this, I read through it, but I didn't pick up on that, but this could be interpreted as you just asked, but there was no follow-through.
Yeah, I put it as kind of a statement question, but it's just not confirmed here, and I believe we confirmed it, and so.
I believe that we as a board, or I'm speaking for myself anyway, was intending to have the public hearing.
That was my
reopened.
understanding of that discussion.
Did anybody not have that
I'll listen
impression?
to the tape again
Yeah,
and
I think it
revise
just,
it as
yeah.
such.
So Mr. Shaw, or Mr. Falk can clarify that, but I think on the tape might be just that. You're asking the question, and what we're doing is nodding our heads, but that doesn't get captured.
It might have been, yeah.
So we're saying that that public hearing will be opened.
Yep.
And it's going to get re-advertised?
That was, yeah, to table the request as advertised to a date certain of.
Yeah, well, because
Well, no,
it's,
'cause it's
because
as-
because it was.
Doesn't have to be re-advertised.
Doesn't have to be re-advertised, because it was,
Well,
I thought that's what we had stated.
This
'cause
is
it
the
was-
one for Lynn Street?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Little update on that. He is not gonna be ready in January in any way, shape, or form.
Okay.
He came in the office the other day. He's looking to send us a letter stating that it looks like he's gonna try to come back in maybe 6 months. It's gonna take him, he hasn't hired anybody or.
As we expected, it very well could be longer than the
So,
few months we said.
We're not gonna see this in January. It's gonna be probably in the summer, I'm guessing. It was very, there's a lot for him.
I think it might be prudent at that time to re-advertise.
Well, I told him the best thing to do, I said, it's not really the best thing to, table something so far in advance. I suggested he just withdraw the whole thing without prejudice and come back when he's ready, because there could be something different with the case or the request, so at this point, it's gonna be, it's 7 months after the initial hearing, 8 months.
That would be the best approach.
That's what we thought, it's just withdraw it without prejudice, and that way, you come back, fresh new case, and it'll all be heard all over again anyway, so that's what we figured what he's gonna do.
Well, it sounds like it's moot, but I think for the record, we're saying
Yeah,
that if it were.
I can adjust
it
the
would.
minutes, so.
Thank you for that,
Take a
Mr.
look at
Shaw.
it.
Was there anything else?
Nope.
Did anybody else have any other edits?
Nope.
Well, with the edit there that we discussed on page 9, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from October 24th, seconded by Mr. Shaw. Show of hands in favor, and that's unanimous. And then we have 3 cases for the November 28th meeting, and of course, we'll have the roof sign.
I'll be back.
And we're looking for regional impact. You see any, Mr. Boucher does not, Mr. Shaw does not, Ms. McKay does not, Mr. Lionel.
I don't understand what number 3 is asking for. But it's probably not regional impact.
It's not really regional impact, it's one large lot with 4 or 5 structures on it right now. Everything will be raised, and it'll be a private street, travelway, whatever you wanna call it, down the middle with 7 homes all on that one lot. So the variance is for the number of principal structures and the density, because the overall density would be exceeding what they need. And there's also a driveway within 50 feet of an intersection of 2 intersecting roads.
This is like typically like a condominium type
Right.
of development.
It's like the one we've seen a couple
We've
on
seen
West
West
Hollis
Hollis,
Street.
exactly.
Even 122 Manchester Street, it's similar to that.
I don't-
Too similar.
Did you see any regional impact on that, Mr. Lionel? So it's unanimous that there's no regional impact. Is there any other business? Make a motion to adjourn, seconded by Mr. Shaw. Show of hands in favor. Unanimous, so we're done at